Hello everyone, welcome to our audiobook channel. If you enjoy the story or want to hear more exciting content, don't forget to like, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment. Your feedback helps us improve and bring even more captivating stories. Enjoy listening. Chapter 1. Jiruo sat in the penultimate row of the classroom by the window in Yonkers First High School, grade 12, class 4. He looked out the window while covering his right eye with his left hand. The teacher was talking non-stop on the podium. Although Jiruo acted uninterested, he was actually listening attentively. Students, the college entrance examination is in 3 days. As your teacher, the only thing I ask of you is to live. The corners of Jiruo's mouth twitched. Even after 2 months had passed since his transmigration, he was still not very used to it. Isn't it outrageous that people die during their college entrance examination, he wondered. However, he had no choice given the circumstances. Secret realms descended in 2025 AD. Countless demons ran amok, and foreign races caused mayhem. Although humans rose up in opposition, the ascension of the secret realms brought about the appearance of spiritual energy, which was incredibly beneficial to living beings. Devils, on the other hand, possessed a variety of peculiar skills. Demonic beasts, on the other hand, have extraordinary physical qualities and thick skin, making them difficult to strike with regular firearms, mainly because it was difficult to aim. This, coupled with the descent of demons and devils, made mining various mineral resources extremely difficult. The initial resistance from the humans was still fine. Later, humans consumed a large number of stored resources amid the confrontation. The battle line grew longer and longer, and they could not build a supply station. As a result, the humans were overpowered in the midst of their resistance. Later on, humans even used nuclear weapons in desperation. The effect was quite apparent. The demons and devils suffered innumerable losses, but there were simply too many of them. As a result, people started using nuclear weapons to destroy entire regions. The demons, however, underwent mutation due to the nuclear explosion's radiation. Some gradually evolved into silicon-based or even energy-based life forms. The radiation caused mutations in the demons and disasters in the land. At that time, humanity was almost extinct. Fortunately, a talented Spirit Fist Grandmaster appeared. He gradually discovered a means to fortify himself with spiritual energy martial arts by seeing and learning from demons. A martial artist's vitality could effectively kill demons. The Grandmaster told everyone in a serious tone, "You have to use spiritual energy to defeat spiritual energy." Hence, the whole nation advocated martial arts. A millennium had passed since then. Technology had been redeveloped and was much more advanced than the world Jiruo had come from. Of course, martial arts remained the more significant factor. Everyone valued and respected martial arts in the society. Therefore, in such a setting, all children would practice martial arts from an early age. During the college entrance examination, they would be put into a secret realm humans had long governed for trial. Although the realm had been controlled for a long time, there were always occasional mishaps because it was still a brutal massacre. Even today, there was still a more than 3% mortality rate in the annual college entrance exam. Most people failed the test because they were too afraid to hunt demons. The college entrance examination had 2 rounds, the literary and martial arts exams. The literary exam ended back in the 2nd year of high school. Jiruo had not yet transmigrated then, but based on his memory, he had done well. The teacher constantly emphasized to the students some precautions to take in the college entrance examination on the podium. No student in the classroom felt fed up even though they were all cliché words. Ding, ding. When the bell rang, the form teacher took a deep look at his students, as if he wanted to engrave the faces of all his students in his mind. All of you must survive. This is your final high school assignment. Everyone must survive this exam. Do you understand? We understand, the students responded brightly in unison. The form teacher waved his hand. Okay. Class is over. Do remember to come and turn in your homework after the exam. After saying that, he left the classroom. The students started talking amongst themselves right away. While some were worried, some were also excited. All in all, no one was afraid, and no one intended to give up. Jiruo stood up. With his uniform draped over his shoulders, he walked out of the classroom with his eyes covered. Classmates. At this moment, the class president, Liang Shixian, stood up and declared, "I think that when the time comes, our class should unite and work together as a team in the secret realm of the Myriad Beast Mountain." He urged everyone to prioritize their safety. Moreover, one should try to hunt the demonic beasts given the chance. If possible, everyone could even get into a good university by working together. The students naturally agreed to his suggestion. After all, team cooperation was allowed in the martial arts exam. Cooperation was not cheating. To begin with, fighting against the demons and the foreign races was never a solo endeavor. Jiruo was in agreement with his idea. Strength came in numbers. Liang Shixian noticed that Jiruo kept covering his eye, so he inquired, "Jiruo, what happened to your eye?" Jiruo snorted coldly and responded, "Humph. I'm the reincarnation of the evil king, and this eye is the evil king's true eye. It is sealed with enough power to destroy the world." He responded in a way that left all of his classmates speechless. Liang Shixian's toes buckled in his shoes as he felt the awkward atmosphere. "You forget it? Do remember to follow us when the time comes." "Heh. Don't worry. I'll protect you guys." Liang Shixian was left speechless. At this moment, Jiruo released the hand that was covering his eye and switched to using his other hand to cover his other eye. "If there's nothing else, I'll go back first." One of his classmates could not help but ask, "Isn't the power sealed in your eye? Why did you switch hands?" "My hand is sore. Why can't I?" Jiruo sneered. Once again, his classmates were at a loss for words. In fact, they had already gotten used to it. Recently, Jiruo's brain seemed not to be working fine. "Anyway, do go back and prepare well. The college entrance examination isn't a trivial matter," Liang Shixian reminded. "Don't worry. I know that very well." Jiruo continued covering his eye while walking out of the school. He would switch to his other hand when his hand felt sore. Suddenly, he sighed and put down his hand. He said helplessly, as expected, "Simply acting like a Chuyunibu doesn't work. How do I trigger this accomplishment, exactly?" Of course, the achievement could also be related to Chuyunibu's behavior. However, he was not a Chuyunibu in his past and present lives. Jiruo went to the supermarket in front of his house and bought a bag of rice. The supermarket cashier knew Jiruo and asked with a smile, "Xiaoruo, the martial arts exam is in a few days. Are you confident?" Jiruo replied with confidence, "Of course. Why else would I buy this bag of rice?" The cashier was taken aback. "Speaking of which, I remember you bought a bag of rice only the day before. What are you buying this bag for?" A mysterious smile appeared on Jiruo's face. "Auntie, I'll tell you, but you can't tell anyone." "Okay." The cashier nodded seriously, thinking that Jiruo was going to tell her some secret. Jiruo whispered, "I'm taking it back to practice iron sand palm." The female cashier responded, "Yeah." Jiruo chuckled. "To be honest, I didn't manage to control the heat when I was practicing the iron sand palm 2 days ago. The rice got cooked." The female cashier was momentarily rendered speechless. "Haha. As long as you're happy, Xiaoruo." In fact, she was a bit puzzled. She mused, this child used to behave quite normally. Why has he suddenly become so immature lately? With a smile, Jiruo bid her goodbye and walked out of the supermarket with the rice. At the same time, he stuck one of his hands into the rice. Jiruo's face could not help but show a satisfied look as soon as he felt rice being wrapped around his palm. Once again, the female cashier was rendered speechless. However, she remained silent. Jiruo walked into his residential building while carrying the rice. "How many floors do I have to carry this bag of rice?" He pulled out his palm and inserted it back again. Apart from Jiruo, no one else was able to hear the voice that constantly rang in his ears. Iron sand palm proficiency +1. In fact, this young man was not behaving immaturely. He was really practicing iron sand palm. In terms of the reasoning behind why he trained with rice, his special advantage was the child-oriented achievement system. By unlocking achievements, he would be able to obtain and upgrade the corresponding skills. In a child's imagination, inserting one's palm into rice was like practicing iron sand palm. Chapter 2. Host, Jiruo. Unlocked achievement type, martial arts. Number of unlocked achievements, 1. Martial arts class skill, iron sand palm, advanced, 225/1000. Jiruo became emotional as he recalled his experience 2 months ago. Jiruo, who had just transmigrated, obtained the original host's memories at that time. Shortly afterward, he obtained his special advantage in achievement system. The original host was an orphan. Her parents died in a fight with a demonic beast. Jiruo pulled through with government assistance, so he studied exceptionally hard. The system allowed Jiruo to unlock and upgrade the corresponding skills by achieving a variety of achievements. However, the system did not seem to be very perceptive. There was neither a starter gift package nor specific instructions on how to unlock achievements. Jiruo had to figure everything out on his own. In the beginning, Jiruo tried various methods based on his many years of experience in reading novels, but he could not unlock any achievements. This made Jiruo think that the system was just for now and nothing useful. A few days ago, Jiruo went downstairs to replenish his supplies when he ran out of food. Initially, he did not plan to buy rice. After all, he lived alone, and cooking was a little troublesome. It was not as convenient and cheap as eating noodles. Even if the government provided him with a sizable monthly allowance, the saying goes that the poor become scholars while the rich become martial artists. To practice martial arts, he needed to consume all kinds of high-grade ingredients. Otherwise, he could not continue simply by relying on his body to absorb spiritual energy. Martial artists were existences that could absorb great power into their own bodies. The human body was a huge treasure trove, and even today, humans had not been able to explore it fully. That day, when Jiruo passed by the main food area and saw the tall pile of rice, he unexpectedly reached his hand into it. This was a habit that he had had since he was young. When Jiruo was young, he thought he was practicing iron sand palm. However, Jiruo no longer felt that way as he grew older, but this habit was still retained. At that time, it was just a subconscious action. However, when his hand wholly submerged into the rice pile, Jiruo heard the system's friendly prompt. Congratulations to the dear host for unlocking the achievement, Iron Sand Palm Rice Internal Reach. Obtained martial art technique, Iron Sand Palm, current level, beginner, proficiency, 0 proficiency can be increased through achievement. Note, Iron Sand Palm and fried rice are a perfect match. This was the system prompt when he had just achieved an achievement. Now, Jiruo's Iron Sand Palm had reached a higher proficiency. It was then that Jiruo finally understood that his system was children-oriented. To be honest, this was the first time he had seen such a friendly system. He mused, didn't the system refer to me as dear host just now? However, the system's functions were powerful. Having been in this world for 2 months, Jiruo knew very well that Iron Sand Palm was just an ordinary martial art technique. However, it was at least a martial apprentice skill, one of the best martial arts techniques among high school students and some college students. If one wanted to raise Iron Sand Palm to higher proficiency under normal circumstances, their palm would undergo a certain degree of deformation. It would be required to soak the palm in a large amount of special medicinal liquid while practicing. Otherwise, he would only cripple his hands and gain nothing if he were to train forcefully. Of course, this level of resource consumption was affordable for an ordinary family. However, Jiruo's circumstances were different. Although the allowance given by the government was not small, it was still tough to practice this kind of martial technique that required the assistance of special medicinal liquids. It was already good enough that the original host could reach level 6 martial apprentice under such circumstances. There were a total of 9 levels in the martial apprentice stage. Level 6 was the average level of the college entrance examination candidates over the years. This was the result of the hard work of the original host with limited resources. Therefore, Jiruo's system was very powerful. It allowed him to practice Iron Sand Palm to the advanced level without consuming extra resources. Regardless of the other issues, the system saved him a lot of resources. From the beginning to the advanced stage of Iron Sand Palm, Jiruo had only consumed 1 bag of rice, and not all of it. After all, Jiruo had fried the bag of rice with his palm. What did this signify? A bottle of mineral water was equivalent to the consumption of a car driving for 100 kilometers. What was outrageous was that the driver mainly drank this bottle of mineral water. There are still 3 days. Jiruo put the bag of rice in the kitchen, poured 1/3 of it into a pot, and started to stir-fry it by inserting both hands. On average, the proficiency of Iron Sand Palm would increase a little for every 10 times he stir-fried the rice. During this process, Jiruo's palms glowed with a faint red light, and the temperature of his palm gradually increased as he practiced. He had calculated that this pot of rice could be stir-fried about 1,000 times before it would be cooked. This would increase his proficiency by about 100 points. As a martial artist, Jiruo's appetite was not small. This pot of rice was enough to submerge the young man's hands entirely. It was enough for Jiruo to eat for a day after it was cooked. The nutrition he took in was enough for him to cultivate until midnight. Jiruo did not intend to go out for the next 3 days. Time flew by, and 3 days had passed. Jiruo gathered at his school. There were 863 students in the entire Yonkers First High School taking the college entrance examination this time. The college entrance examination was a joint examination for all schools. According to the data from previous years, there were about 1 million students taking the college entrance examination, and the mortality rate was close to 3%. In other words, there would be nearly 30,000 students who would never return from the examination hall. Students, this trip to Myriad Beast Mountain is the time to test the results of your many years of cultivation. The principal stood on the high flag-raising platform and made a motivating pre-examination speech. I would like to advise all of you that the duty of a martial artist is to guard, and not to fight fearlessly. So, all of you can think about it first. If you feel you can't adapt to that kind of life, it's still not too late to quit now. Once the students entered the secret realm of Myriad Beast Mountain, even if an emergency help device was given during the martial examination, it was unlikely that the rescue personnel would arrive at the first moment. At that time, life and death would be up to fate. As martial artists, they needed indomitable courage and unrivaled determination. Therefore, I hope that all of you will reconsider this one last time. Jiruo raised his eyebrows. It was the first time he had seen such a pre-test pep rally. He thought, to think that the principal would even advise students to give up on the exam. However, it was normal when Jiruo thought about it. After all, it was a secret realm. Hundreds of thousands of people would be taking the examination at the same time. Although the level of the demonic beasts inside was low, there was still quite a lot of them. The risk factor would not be low. After a while, when the principal saw that no one had the intention of backing out, more than 800 of the students' faces below the stage were full of determination. Although it was the first time they had to face bloodshed, they seemed to be prepared. I understand. The principal said with pride, "Here, I wish all of you a swift victory as you begin your path from this myriad beast mountain and walk on the path to the pinnacle of martial arts. All of you are the future of humanity." As he spoke, the principal waved his hand. "Now, each class shall line up accordingly. Some forward in an orderly manner and collect your weapons." Behind him, the dean fiddled with a device, which was activated after the first class had received their weapons. An indescribably colorful vortex gate appeared on the flag-raising platform. "Then, I wish all of you a triumphant return. Now the examination begins." Chapter 3. There are firearms among the weapons distributed by the school, but not many students would choose them. Firstly, the martial arts examination would last for 7 days. It would be impossible for a high school student to have enough ammunition for 7 days. Secondly, using firearms to attack would cause too much of a commotion. It was another matter if they could hit the demons, but the sound of gunfire could easily attract other demons. As such, it would be more convenient to use ancient weapons than firearms. Therefore, almost no one would choose firearms during the martial arts examination. Jiruo picked a standard traditional knife. He thought he would be able to trigger an achievement like "One day I have a knife in my hand." There was no achievement triggered. Thus, Jiruo took another sword and crossed it behind his back. The teacher who distributed the weapons was unbothered. There were students like this every year. They probably thought that the more weapons they had, the more hope they had for survival. However, what was most fitting was the best for martial artists. The high school students taking the entrance examination could only be considered martial artists' reserve forces. Those who had not experienced the bloodshed could not be called martial artists. Liang Shixian, the class monitor, followed behind Jiruo. Seeing that Jiruo was carrying a knife and a sword on his back, he could not help but ask, "Why are you holding a knife and a sword? Why didn't you pick 2 knives or swords? Knife and sword techniques are different. Do I have to report my knife and sword ambidexterity to you?" Jiruo raised his chin. He tried to trigger the achievement by doing so, yet nothing happened. The achievement system seemed to be dead. If a child were to get a sword, he would feel great accomplishment. Jiruo was not sure what the system's criteria were. However, he had already mastered the advanced level of iron sand palm. As long as he was careful during the college entrance examination, there would not be any problems. Unfortunately, Jiruo could not reach the 3rd stage, the perfection stage, due to the lack of time. His current proficiency had only reached 536. The basic skills of using conventional weapons were compulsory, and the original host had studied hard and mastered them long ago. Therefore, it was not strange for Jiruo to carry a sword and knife simultaneously, as he could use both. Of course, his knife and sword ambidexterity was an exaggeration. Liang Shixian was rendered speechless. The class president frowned and reminded, "In short, be careful after entering the examination field. Try to reunite with our classmates as soon as possible. There's strength in numbers. It's safer for everyone to be together. Don't worry. I understand." During these 2 months, Jiruo was quite surprised that he did not encounter melodramatic plots like being bullied by his classmates like normal transmigrators. The students in his class were very united. In addition, the teachers in his school were also very responsible. This was evident from the words of his form teacher 3 days ago and the principal's speech before the examination. Survival should be their first priority. However, this was also good. Jiruo's achievement system was for children, so acting cool and slapping faces shouldn't be considered a child's achievement. "Classmates, do follow me closely." After the whole class had collected their weapons, Liang Shixian let out a low cry and was ready to be the first to step into the secret realm's teleportation gate. Although he seemed calm and collected, his hand that held the knife was trembling. No one knew if it was from excitement or fear. At this moment, Jiruo stepped forward with his sword on his back and announced, "I will lead." Then, Jiruo charged into the portal amidst the surprised gazes of his classmates. No one noticed that when Jiruo entered the portal, his hands turned red, and his temperature rose sharply. That was the performance of the iron sand palm being used to the extreme. There was a slight stagnation in the moment of passing through the portal as if he had jumped into the water. The next instant, Jiruo found himself in a wilderness with lush grass and trees and out of the school. Jiruo hid behind a tree vigilantly and observed his surroundings. Oh. It's a random type martial arts examination. Jiruo frowned slightly. Although the martial arts examination did not prohibit teamwork, the examination format was subjected to change. For example, students from the same class or school would land in the same place for an easy stage. A group of 10 people would be the general difficulty, and landing randomly was the difficult mode. The main reason was to let the students understand that plans could not keep up with changes. Simply put, it was to develop a sense of crisis awareness. The teleportation to the secret realm was instantaneous. If it was the normal mode, Jiruo should be able to see the 9 temporary teammates assigned to him for this test when he arrived. However, he did not see them. Therefore, this test was a random difficult mode. It's a little hard to deal with. Jiruo furrowed his brows and started to observe the growth of the surrounding flora and fauna to determine the direction. However, at this moment, a cry of pain caught Jiruo's attention. After turning around, he chuckled. Liang Shixian had landed on the top of the tree. Being caught off guard, he fell on his face. Fortunately, I have teammates. It's not completely random. Jiruo heaved a sigh of relief quietly. He walked forward and helped Liang Shixian up. Class president, this is fate. Jiruo. Liang Shixian was stunned for a moment. He immediately looked around and asked, this is a 2-person match-type random martial arts examination. It seems to be the case. Liang Shixian frowned. Let's find a way to meet up with the other students first. Sure. Jiruo pointed at flora and fauna and stated, I arrived earlier than you. I have roughly identified the direction. The west is in this direction. I suggest we go this way. Why? Liang Shixian was taken aback. Jiruo explained, we shall eliminate demons by going in the west, while we shall return in triumph if we head to the east. That's what it says in Journey to the West. Liang Shixian was rendered speechless. Let's head east. Before the exam, the students of grade 12 class 4 had already devised corresponding plans for some possible exam patterns. If it was a random martial arts examination, everyone must head east after landing and rendezvous before discussing other matters. Jiruo knew this, so he said that. They were on high alert as they walked toward the east. The magnetic field in the secret realm was disordered, so a compass was useless. They could only rely on theoretical knowledge taught in school to identify the direction. Looking at the sun would not work to determine the direction either. The secret realm of Myriad Beast Mountain had day and night, but there was no sun or moon. Most secret realms were like this. 2 hours later, the two of them encountered another 2-person team. The other party was not a student from Yonkers First High School, judging from their school uniform. Be careful. Liang Shixian tightened his grip on the steel knife in his hand vigilantly. In this secret realm, other than demon beasts, they also had to guard against candidates from other schools. Although the other party would not necessarily hurt them, they might not help them either. In fact, the candidates from other schools might even snatch the spoils of war they had obtained from killing demonic beasts in a particular situation. This was one of the criteria for judging the martial arts examination results. Everyone wanted to have good results. Therefore, the teachers in the school repeatedly reminded them that they had to be careful in the secret realm. What Liang Shixian did was right, but before he could finish his words, Jiruo waved enthusiastically toward the other party and introduced, Hello, my name is Jiruo. I'm from Yonkers. Liang Shixian was taken aback and mused, didn't I just frigging tell him to be careful? The other party was a little hesitant at first. After hesitating, he said, we are from Henderson, and my name is Zhang Quan. I'm Lu Neng. Seeing this, Liang Shixian sighed and thought, Jiruo's carefree personality makes people worry about him. No one noticed that after the 2 students from Henderson responded, Jiruo suddenly froze for a moment. He then walked up with a smile and held Zhang Quan's hand. While the 2 students were still in a daze, he said even more enthusiastically, it's fate that we met. Why don't we form a team? Jiruo, we still need to. Before Liang Shixian could finish his sentence, Zhang Quan answered hesitantly, okay, but we'll split the spoils equally. Of course. Jiruo smiled. Liang Shixian's jaw dropped, and he thought, are we not going to find our classmates now? What Liang Shixian did not know was that the reason why Jiruo was so enthusiastic about inviting the other party to team up was that Jiruo had received a system notification after greeting them. Congratulations to the host for unlocking the functional system achievement, the first person to greet a stranger in the new semester. Acquired title, Diplomatic Spokesperson. Title, Diplomatic Spokesperson. Increases persuasion by 10%. The effect of the title can be enhanced by greeting strangers. Remark, speaking is a form of art. Since Jiruo had become a diplomatic spokesperson, it would not be logical for him not to team up. Liang Shixian sighed. Seeing that Jiruo had already started establishing friendly relations with the students from Henderson, it would be inappropriate for him to leave. Thus, Liang Shixian introduced himself, and then they began to set the rules for the distribution of the loot. However, before they could finish discussing, a sound sounded. Hiss. The sudden hissing sound made them freeze for a moment. Jiruo's eyes focused, and 5 or 6 green shadows scampered out of the grass. Chapter 4. Perhaps due to Jiruo being a transmigrator, his reaction speed was faster than the rest despite being the same level 6 martial apprentice. Moreover, Jiruo lived 2 lives, so he had more life experience than ordinary high school students. Therefore, even though he behaved a little immaturely to trigger his achievement system, he had never let down his guard. Jiruo was the first to notice the green shadows the moment they scampered out from the grass, and he was also the first to react and counterattack. Due to their positioning, the green shadows' primary target was Lu Neng, who had his back to them. Watch out! Jiruo exclaimed in a low voice and pushed Lu Neng away. Then, he used his basic movement technique. While dodging, his palms turned red, and he struck his fists continuously. Jiruo was using the iron sand palm. Those green shadows were fast, but Jiruo was even faster. In the blink of an eye, he struck out 5 palms, which precisely hit the heads of each green shadow. The advanced iron sand palm shattered the heads of the 5 green shadows upon contact, killing them on the spot. The iron sand palm was very powerful. The green shadows died almost at the same time. Jiruo caught them in one hand. The demonic beasts killed were counted in the martial arts examination results. Jade Snake. Jiruo raised his eyebrows. With a glance, he recognized the identity of the demonic beasts immediately. The original host studied very hard, and Jiruo was not bad after taking over. Jiruo was familiar with all the demon beast illustrations taught in high school. Initially, Lu Neng was slightly annoyed that Jiruo had suddenly pushed him away. After all, he was caught off guard just now. When Jiruo pushed him away, he staggered and almost fell. But after seeing Jiruo kill the Jade Snake, Lu Neng felt very grateful. After all, he might have been bitten if Jiruo had not reacted quickly. However, Jiruo hollered immediately, "What's there to thank me for? Run!" The so-called Jade Snake was actually not a demonic beast, or rather, it was an unrated demonic beast. It carried paralytic neurotoxins in its body. Its speed was not slow, and it was good at camouflage. If there were only one or a few of them, those Jade Snakes would be nothing in front of Jiruo, a level 6 martial apprentice who learned advanced iron sand palm. However, Jade Snakes moved in groups, and 5 was not considered a group. It could be seen how well they had mastered the basic knowledge from this incident. After Jiruo recognized the green snake, he ran immediately. Liang Shixian was stunned for a moment, but he quickly followed him. As for Lu Neng and Zhang Quan, they stood rooted to the ground, not understanding why these 2 younger students, whom they had just met, were running. Then, they saw a terrifying scene. Just then, the entire grass field suddenly trembled violently. Hundreds of jade snakes raised their heads from the grass, staring at the crowd with their cold pupils. They flicked their tongues, and the terrifying hiss sound made people's skin tingle. "Do run toward the grass where the shade is lighter," Jiruo shouted. At this moment, the surrounding vegetation began to tremble violently. A large number of jade snakes slithered out from the dark side of the grass, and the same happened on the canopy of trees. The snakes were using such a method to mislead humans. While fleeing, Jiruo took time to observe his surroundings. How do I determine the direction by the grass color? They are the same color. How could there be any shades, they mused. Lu Neng and Zhang Quan were still a step too slow. The jade snakes piled like a tide behind them, and they were about to catch up. Keep up. Jiruo turned around and threw out a palm. He activated his iron sand palm to the extreme, and the red light on his palms became even brighter. The jade snakes instinctively wanted to escape when they got close to him. Under the activation of the advanced iron sand palm, the temperature of Jiruo's palms was so high that even cold-blooded animals felt instinctively disgusted. Jiruo did not plan on killing too many snakes. After all, he could not kill them all. Seeing the number of jade snakes was increasing, Jiruo turned and ran without hesitation. They were all college entrance exam candidates, and the average level of the college entrance exam students was level 6 martial apprentice. By fleeing with all their might, these unranked demonic jade snakes naturally could not catch up with them. The snakes could only watch the 4 of them run further and further away. An hour later, the 4 finally ran out of the forest. They did not have time to distinguish the direction in that dangerous situation just now and were currently lost. However, no one cared about this problem now. While everyone was panting, they felt a sense of relief after surviving a disaster. Jiruo, thank you for just now, both Luneng and Zhangquan said gratefully while gasping for air. Although they were both college entrance exam students, they were not from the same school. Luneng and Zhangquan did not expect Jiruo to save them in that situation. We're teammates now. Teammates should naturally take care of each other, Jiruo answered. He had thought that he would be able to trigger an achievement, and he had even thought of the name of the achievement: saving a life is better than building a 7-story pagoda. It was a pity that no achievement was triggered. Class president, where should we go next? Jiruo asked. Liang Shixian looked around and sighed. He responded, I don't know either. The methods the school taught to determine directions are useless for the time being. The jade snakes had once again gone into hibernation in the woods behind them. The shade of the vegetation once again changed to a different green. However, they knew that the jade snakes were lurking on the darker side after what they had just experienced. Zhangquan raised his hand weakly and suggested, why don't we wait here? I was a little scared just now, so I activated the rescue device. Jiruo was at a loss for words and thought, he has already escaped, and he is saying he activated the rescue device. Luneng also added awkwardly, mine too. Jiruo and Liang Shixian looked at the other two parties' wristwatches, which showed the stress signal being sent. Please try to stay safe. Jiruo was rendered speechless. The rescue device had indeed been activated, but the secret realm of Myriad Beast Mountain was just too big. Even if the invigilators and rescue personnel had all opened up their meridians and surpassed the limits of the normal human body, it was still impossible for them to reach every location where the rescue signal was sent in the first place. If the situation was really critical, activating this device would actually be of no use under normal circumstances. Based on Jiruo's understanding, the rescue team had always collected the corpses of the students. Even though the martial arts examination grounds had already been cleared by powerful martial artists, there were still countless dangers present. Hence, the death rate in the martial arts examination remained high. This was something that could not be helped. Martial artists had to go through bloodshed in order to be able to stand alone. In the face of countless foreign races and demons, humans were unable to even take care of themselves. It was impossible to achieve a safe and injury-free college entrance examination in a short time. I'm sorry. Zhangquan said apologetically, we were too scared at that time and subconsciously activated it. But don't worry, it will only be us. You'll still be qualified to take the exam. The invigilator will only take us away, and it won't affect you. Luneng also added, that's right. Do you guys want to wait with us? We've already lost our exam qualifications, and we're also lost. When the invigilator comes, we can help you ask for directions. Jiruo and Liang Shixian glanced at each other. Okay. We'll wait with you. However, no one noticed that the notification on Luneng and Zhangquan's wristwatches was still saying distress signal being sent, without any change or indication of who was coming to the rescue. This was their first time taking part in the martial arts examination, so they were not very familiar with the emergency device. The teachers at school only told them to find a safe place as soon as possible and wait patiently after activating the device. Suddenly, Jiruo's eyes lit up. Look what I found. Everyone was all taken back momentarily and looked in the direction Jiruo was staring at. Jiruo's eyes were shining as he walked in that direction. Then, they saw Jiruo bent down to pick up a wooden stick with a jovial look. Jiruo, why did you pick this up? Liang Shixian asked curiously. Class president, look at how straight the stick is. Jiruo posed proudly and continued, it's like a sword. Look at me. Am I handsome? The rest of them were rendered speechless, and they wondered, doesn't he has a real sword on his back? Jiruo, you, Liang Shixian said helplessly, can't you tell the occasion? Can you don't behave immaturely? However, Jiruo hummed softly. I don't want to. I don't want. I don't want to grow up. The world after I grow up has no fairy tales. Once again, the rest of them were left speechless. Chapter 5. Director. What is it? We've lost contact with the H District's martial artists. In Bactria's education division, the director was stunned. H District? I remember that the martial arts exam is open until the D District. Moreover, a district to D District was cleared in advance. Why would we lose contact with the patrolling martial artists in the exam? Humans divided Myriad Beast Mountain secret realm into 60 regions named after heavenly stem. Under normal circumstances, the martial examination would be held in the 4 major regions, A, B, C, and D districts. The regions after that were for higher level martial artists or bounty martial artists to gain experience. The subordinate was sweating profusely and said hurriedly, we just found out that the zone numbers are different from the ones we cleared before. What was the original zone for H district? The director's face darkened. JJ District, the subordinate answered weakly. J District. The director stood up and raised his voice. How could there be such a big mistake? What the hell are you guys doing? The director continued angrily, do you know what J district represents? Do you know how many students will die because of this mistake? Director, W.E. The subordinate's back was drenched in cold sweat. This isn't our fault. We did clean up the examination area before the start of the examination. However, the secret realm of Myriad Beast Mountain seemed to have had a very subtle large-scale geological movement after that, and the position of the mountainside and the foot of the mountain seemed to have reversed. By the time we found out, the exam had already started. That's not what I wanted to hear. The director's face darkened with fury. He mused, if this matter isn't handled well, I might get fired. Most importantly, the lives of those children. Why aren't you fixing the problem? What are you reporting to me for? Hurry up and send more people to Myriad Beast Mountain. Bring the students back and end the martial arts examination. But the subordinate hesitated before saying, the number of candidates. Indeed, the number of examines taking the martial arts examination every time was as high as 1,000,000. It was not realistic to pick up all the students in a short period of time. It was true that the martial arts examination was conducted through the secret realm's teleportation device. Under normal circumstances, they only needed to reactivate the teleportation device to simultaneously pull back all the examines. However, the secret realm teleportation device involved space-time, after all. The interval between the two activations was at least 7 days, or it would suffer severe space-time damage. It would be fine if it were a powerful martial artist, but not for martial arts examination students. You're still thinking about this at a time like this? The students' lives are most important. The director was so infuriated that he began cursing. Send more people and borrow martial artists above Pulsing Realm from the other departments. I want you to gather all the students as soon as possible. Forget it. I'll go there myself. Send a notice to the major schools, and then let all martial artists above the Pulsing Realm in the division to Myriad Beast Mountain. The director did not even have time to take his coat. He smashed the large floor-to-ceiling window in the office and leaped from the 18th floor. Although the director was in the education field, he was still a powerful martial artist. I hope the rescue is timely. Otherwise, I'll be a sinner. In a frantic, the director ran with all his might. At his level, general transportation was not as fast as him. More importantly, there was no time to prepare a transportation tool. Although humans controlled the secret realm of Myriad Beast Mountain, its actual area was incomparably wide. Humans controlled only 3 million square kilometers of land from the foot of the mountain to the mountainside. The 4 big areas, A, B, C, and D districts were indeed completely under control. However, the current problem was the geological changes in the secret realm of Myriad Beast Mountain that caused all the regions to be in chaos. Many secret realms had their own rules. For example, there were no fluctuations when geological changes occurred in the secret realm of Myriad Beast Mountain. In the past, large-scale geological changes in Myriad Beast Mountain would occur once every 50 years, while ordinary geological changes would only appear on the mountaintop, not affecting the areas controlled by humans. It had only been 36 years since the last large-scale geological change. This was a situation that no one had anticipated. There was a high chance that they would suffer heavy casualties in this martial arts examination if the situation was not dealt with in time. In fact, the director of the education department was not even sure if the rescue operation could be carried out properly. Due to the disordered magnetic field in the area, the signal of electronic equipment would not be able to be fully covered starting from E district. The further the district was, the lower the coverage of electronic signals. The geological changes of Myriad Beast Mountain would not only affect the position of the mountain, but also the magnetic field. The emergency call for help equipment in the martial arts examination could be considered useless. Jiruo, when did you learn Iron Sand Palm? Liang Shixian asked curiously while they were waiting. They had completely relaxed. At this moment, there were no demonic beasts in the area. In addition, Lu Neng and Zhang Quan activated their rescue devices. All they needed to do was to wait patiently for the inspecting martial artists to arrive. Last week. Jiruo waved the wooden stick and spoke truthfully. Liang Shixian seemed to want to say something but held back. Finally, he snorted lightly and responded, "It's fine if you don't want to say it. Who are you fooling?" He could tell that Jiruo's Iron Sand Palm was a higher proficiency than a beginner's, but it was a bit unrealistic to say that he had reached an advanced stage. However, no matter what level his Iron Sand Palm was, it definitely required a lot of practice to be able to have palms like red iron. This process could not be fast. His hands would not be able to withstand the high-intensity training even with the help of the medicinal liquid. Jiruo's hands would be crippled if he simply trained forcefully. Therefore, Liang Shixian did not believe Jiruo at all when he said that he had only been practicing for a week. However, he also did not say anything more. Liang Shixian knew about Jiruo's family situation very well as the class president. Although he was curious about how Jiruo had the money to buy medicinal liquid to cultivate iron sand palm, it was not fitting for him to ask. Liang Shixian thought, after all, it will inevitably involve one's family circumstances when such a question is asked and Jiruo's family situation. As someone who had lived 2 lives, Jiruo could naturally tell what Liang Shixian was worried about. This made him feel heartwarming. The few of them chatted idly as they waited for the examining martial artists to arrive. Jiruo waved the stick for a long time, but no achievement was prompted. He tied the stick to his waist and sat on the ground, thinking. Soon, 2 hours passed. The secret realm of Myriad Beast Mountain, which had no sun, gradually dimmed. Liang Shixian and Jiruo finally realized that something was wrong. Why are they taking so long to come? Could it be that there was some kind of accident? The two of them looked at each other and stood up at the same time. We have to go. Zhang and Lu Neng were stunned for a moment. But the patrolling martial artist exam patroller hasn't arrived yet. Chapter 6. We can't wait any longer. After all, we'll be in danger if we wait any longer, Liang Shixian said seriously. But it's very safe here, Lu Neng responded hesitantly. Hearing this, Jiruo shook his head slightly and mused, these two probably sleep in class. Why do they not understand anything? Even I, a transmigrator, know the difference between day and night. Liang Shixian patiently explained, safety might only be during the day. In general, demonic beasts are divided into daytime and nighttime. Normally, nighttime demonic beasts are more aggressive and violent than daytime demonic beasts. Jiruo added, besides, we do not know why those jade snakes suddenly stopped chasing us. Even if the jade snakes were tired of chasing, they should have recovered after such a long rest. We must leave and find a new place to camp. Otherwise, we don't know what will happen when night falls. Zhang and Lu Neng looked at each other and seemed slightly hesitant. We've waited so long. Jiruo replied seriously, it is because we have waited for a long time that we have to go. As far as I know, the rescue time for the invigilating martial artists has never exceeded half an hour in the past martial examinations. Look. How long have we been waiting now? That's all right then. The group of them decided to leave. However, they were facing a very serious problem. Currently, there seemed to be some changes in the secret realm of Myriad Beast Mountain. The methods of determining directions taught in school were no longer useful. Thus, the grim problem of which direction to head made them stop in their steps not long after walking for a short time. Which way do we go? Lu Neng asked weakly. He realized that Jiruo and Liang Shixian were probably top students. Regardless, their theoretical knowledge was solid. However, he did not know that Liang Shixian was also troubled by this question. To be honest, Liang Shixian did not know where to go either. Jiruo pondered for a while. Then, he took off one of his shoes and threw it into the sky. Under their bewildered gazes, Jiruo walked in the direction of the shoe and said, this way. Jiruo Liang Shixian gritted his teeth. Are you serious? Of course. We can leave it to fate by throwing a shoe and determining the direction. This is the arrangement by God. Do you have a better idea? Jiruo raised his chin. This. The few of them looked at each other. Finally, Liang Shixian sighed. All right, let's do as you say. At the same time, Jiruo received several message prompts from the system. Congratulations for showing the way successfully. You have unlocked the functional achievement, a gold class tour guide. Acquired specialty, absolute directional sense. Absolute directional sense, when faced with a choice of direction, a certain percentage of correct correction will be granted. The current correction is 5%. It can be raised by repeatedly guiding direction. The maximum value is 100%. Remarks, explore, witness, and possess. Jiruo's eyes lit up, and he mused, this is good. I have become a tour guide. Class president, we need to head east, don't we? Liang Shixian's expression was not good. Walk in the direction of the tip of the shoe. Ahem. Jiruo cleared his throat. Follow me. Jiruo picked up his shoes and put them on. He walked in the direction of the tip of the shoe, which was pointing to the right. Turn a little to the right. This side is east. The rest of the party thought, he calls this turning a little to the right? It's almost to the F***ing heel. How is that turning a little? However, Jiruo had no choice. The absolute directional sense he had just obtained made a minor correction when he pointed the direction. Although it was not very accurate, it gave Jiruo a rough idea of the direction. Jiruo cleared his throat awkwardly. We don't know where to go anyway, don't we? I feel that throwing a shoe for directions doesn't seem very reliable. The rest of the group was rendered speechless, and they thought helplessly, I guess he also knows that this is unreliable. However, as Jiruo had mentioned, they did not know which direction to go. Then, let's go. Don't dawdle. It'll be dark if we dawdle any longer. Liang Shixian sighed and said. Don't worry. Jiruo patted his chest and said confidently, listen to me. You won't go wrong listening to me. After all, absolute directional sense was a special feature of the system's reward. The general direction would be generally correct. This was what Jiruo thought, so he was very confident. However, he had overlooked one thing. The current feature only had a 5% correction effect. Therefore, if the direction that Jiruo pointed was wrong, the correct direction feedback he received would only be 5% of the correct direction. Jiruo and the others began making their way. In fact, no one knew that they were heading south instead of east. They were moving south-southeast, and extremely south. Strictly speaking, if one divided a direction into 90 degrees, then the four directions, north, south, east, and west, would be four right-angled coordinate systems. This direction was 5 degrees away from the coordinate system of the south. Everyone, follow me closely. Don't get lost. Jiruo took the lead, not forgetting to remind them. Got it? Liang Shixian felt mentally exhausted. He felt that Jiruo was unreliable, but someone had to lead the team. Although Liang Shixian was the class president, he did not know the right direction. Jiruo had already chosen the direction, so if Liang Shixian changed it again, he would only make them stay in the same place or completely lose their way. Since Liang Shixian was already lost, he might as well walk in one direction. As a class president with excellent character and academic performance, Liang Shixian knew that although humans controlled the secret realm of Myriad Beast Mountain, the danger that could be encountered in the area opened for the martial arts examination would not exceed the limit that a 6th-grade apprentice could withstand. There were 4 of them now. Jiruo had iron sand palm, and Liang Shixian was not weak either. He was at least a level 6 martial apprentice and believed he was not weak. In short, as long as they did not encounter a swarm of demonic beasts like the jade snakes from before, they would not be in much danger. Not to mention, there were 2 guys who had activated their rescue devices. The examination patrollers could arrive any time, so he did not have to worry too much, even if he chose a random direction. Therefore, Liang Shixian did not have any objections to Jiruo leading the team. In fact, his thinking was actually correct. However, he did not know that the current Myriad Beast Mountain secret realm was already different from the past 36 years. They walked for a few more hours until their body was aching, and they felt the world spinning. After being chased by the jade snakes for so long, it had been almost a day since the martial examination started. They had not eaten anything and were famished. I wouldn't have thrown away those snakes if I knew this would happen. We could have grilled and eaten them, Jiruo mumbled while rubbing his stomach. The martial arts examination was a comprehensive exam. Although the exam candidates were allowed to bring weapons, they were not allowed to bring basic living necessities like food. Wilderness survival was also an essential testing criterion in the martial arts examination. Candidates must survive on their own until the end of the exam in this primeval forest like Myriad Beast Mountain, for 7 days. Over the years, there had been many candidates who starved to death in the examination. Moreover, the emergency device was able to make simple judgments. If one was simply hungry, the device would not be activated. Anyway, that was what the teacher had said, but Jiruo felt that he was lying. There was no turning back once the martial arts examination began. A martial artist must have the courage to press forward all the way. I'm starving. Jiruo could not help but complain. He had triggered a total of 3 achievements ever since he got the system, and the conditions to trigger them were all very immature, so Jiruo changed his style as a result. Jiruo treated himself as a child, and a child would speak when he was hungry. The younger ones would even cry. Bear with it. If it really doesn't work, we can eat the turf. We can't eat mushrooms and demonic beasts casually. Liang Shixian added, it's easy to get poisoned. Let's find a place to camp first. Jiruo sighed. Perhaps Jiruo's desire to eat was too strong, but a blood-red paddy field appeared in front of them 10 minutes later. Chapter 7. This time, not only Jiruo and Liang Shixian, but also Lu Neng and Zhang Quan, who were not good academically, were stunned. This is blood-red rice. Liang Shixian spoke hesitantly. In the conventional sense, this was already a low-level heaven and earth treasure, but its level was significantly low. Its primary function was to strengthen one's blood, and there were no restrictions on its use. Any martial artist of any rank could consume it. In particular, it was very effective for martial apprentices like Jiruo. It could be considered an experience potion for martial apprentices. Typically, there would be blood-red rice in secret realms because it needed to absorb the vitality of strong creatures to grow. Their roots would extract the essence of flesh and blood to nourish themselves, producing blood-red rice with a blood-strengthening effect. There were deaths in the secret realm every day, so it was reasonable to encounter 1 or 2 stalks of blood-red rice occasionally. However, The problem was that there were not just 1 or 2 stalks of blood rice in front of them but an entire field. Not only that, but the surroundings of the blood red rice field were exceptionally tidy. It was a square rice field with a length and width of about 50 meters. Clearly, someone was growing the blood red rice. How could there be such a thing in the secret realm of Myriad Beast Mountain? It would have been fine if it was grown naturally, but this was not the case. As they were hesitating, piercing chatter could be heard from the other end of the blood red rice field. Take cover. Jiruo and Liang Shixian reacted very quickly and pressed Lu Neng and Zhang Quan to the ground. The lush grass hid the 4 men's figures, and they did not even dare to breathe. They held their breath and lay in the grass under great concentration. The conversation on the other side was clearly not human. Sigh, the leader is really #at Yuan at? I don't understand why he wants us to bring meat at #Yuan. We clearly didn't even have the chance to eat this. Alas, the chief is really #at Yuan at? I can't figure out why he wants us to bring meat at #Yuan. We obviously have no chance to eat this. How can you say that about the chief? When do we not have the chance to eat this? Just drink some blood red rice soup, and it'll count $at as eating. Let's not talk about this for now. We should go back. Recently, the great demons on the mountain top seem to be #%. It's not peaceful. Jiruo and the other 3 were quietly lying in the grass, listening to the conversation between the 2 creatures. They could understand most of the conversation, but there was still a part that they could understand. It was not in a language that humans could understand. One of the creatures was complaining while the other was trying to persuade him. It was followed by the sound of a heavy object falling to the ground. The 2 creatures did not seem to have any intention of staying, and their voices gradually faded. Jiruo lifted his head to the same height as the blood red rice carefully and quietly observed. Goblins. Jiruo was a little confused when looking at the 2 green figures that were not particularly tall. How could such low-level demons speak human language? After the 2 goblins were far away, Jiruo informed the others of what he had seen. Liang Shixian's brows were tightly furrowed, while the other 2 were bewildered. Is it strange that goblins can talk? Zhang Quan asked, confused. Liang Shixian explained, goblins are a kind of low-level group-dwelling magical creature. Although they have their own language, it is just some roaring with emotions. Normally, their intelligence level is very low, and our language is too complicated for them. In theory, it is impossible for us to understand their speech, and they can't speak our language either. Jiruo added, moreover, this field of blood red rice seems to have been planted by goblins. No matter their intelligence or civilization level, my teacher said that goblins are just barely equivalent to the level of humans in the early Stone Age. They may be able to fix sharp-edged stones on a wooden stick, but they would never think of planting crops. This is too high-end for them. What should we do now? Lu Neng asked, stunned. At this moment, the 2 goblins had already left. Jiruo stood up and took out the stick from his waist. What else? Let's eat. Are you guys not hungry? Huh. Jiruo swung a wooden stick using the basic sword techniques taught in school, swinging a beautiful pattern. The young man holding the wooden stick suddenly said, to be honest, I was a famous farmer helper when I was a child. The villagers would find me every autumn harvest before they start harvesting. Liang Shixian froze for a moment. Why? Because. Jiruo looked at the prey the goblins had thrown into the rice field. He recorded it with the wristwatch specially issued by the school at the time of the martial arts examination. The wristwatch could not only help him ask for help, but it also had the function of recording information. The prey that the goblins had brought added to Jiruo's score. After doing all this, Jiruo stood in the middle of the paddy field, pointing at the paddy field scornfully. With a small wooden stick, he practiced his unexplainable swordsmanship. In fact, Jiruo was just waving it randomly. If they don't find me, they might not be able to harvest in peace. Following Jiruo's movements, the blood red rice was knocked down by him. A special sense of accomplishment welled up in his heart. Liang Shixian was speechless and mused, isn't he behaving childishly? What's there to be so proud about? The joy on the young man's face grew more and more prominent. Just then, he received a system prompt. Congratulations for unlocking sword achievements. If a young man were to hold the stick, all vegetables in 10 miles would be blown. Acquired buff, sword appreciation, beginner. Sword appreciation, increase comprehension related to the sword to the maximum level. Novice level sword appreciation can increase the comprehension of all sword related methods to the maximum value of the novice level. If the upper limit is exceeded, the comprehension will return to normal. Note, this ability can be raised by unlocking achievements. Remark, wasting food isn't what good children should do. Jiruo was pleasantly surprised and waved the wooden stick harder and harder. Soon, he destroyed the entire blood red rice field. Come, come. Take as much as you can. Let's have a good meal today. Jiruo did not have any psychological burden doing this at all. Although it was shameful to waste food, it was not like he did not want to eat. Moreover, the field was planted by goblins. These monsters had a deep hatred for humans, so it was perfect for making them feel unsettled. Of course, it would be best if they could be killed. They looked at each other and were also famished. The group picked up the blood-red rice that was cut by Jiruo. Each of them held a large bundle. Wait. We don't seem to be able to take much like this. Jiruo touched his chin and pulled out a standard sword from his back. He cut off the ear of rice and wrapped it in his school uniform, leaving the stem in place. Don't take the rice stalks away. Jiruo said seriously, let them rot here to increase the fertility of the land so that we can continue to plant them in the future. The goblins will be moved to tears if they knew that we are so considerate. The few people were rendered speechless again. There were too many things to address that they did not know where to start. However, the group also knew the current situation. It was indeed much more convenient to take away the ears of rice than the stalks. Hence, the few of them followed suit and took off their school uniforms to carry the ears of rice. The tense atmosphere of the martial arts examination seemed to have disappeared. Everyone, including Liang Shixian, was happily experiencing the joy of their harvest. After all, they were still teenagers. The happiness of teenagers was actually straightforward. Furthermore, they were famished. The blood-red rice was known as an experience potion for martial apprentices. If they were to buy it, the price was not what ordinary families could afford in the long run. How could they not be happy now that they had gotten it for free? Chapter 8. The blood-red rice field was a square rice field with a length and width of about 50 meters. Although the area was large, the crop yield was not high. There were not many ears of rice gathered. After all, this was not some hybrid rice, and a stalk of blood-red rice might only have a few dozen grains of rice. In addition, their school uniforms were all loose sportswear. The teenagers used their 4 school uniforms to wrap the rice up and filled their pockets, plundering all the ears of rice in the field. There was no waste at all. Let's go and eat, Jiruo uttered happily. Jiruo finally realized that the absolute directional sense he had obtained before was a godly skill. It might not be a coincidence that he had encountered the blood-red rice field. Jiruo's strong desire to eat caused absolute directional sense to subconsciously correct their direction. After all, Jiruo had been leading the way, so he could basically overshadow other people's luck. However, Jiruo's luck was not any good. To be honest, he had not even won another bottle a few times in his previous life in drinks lucky draws. A moment later, the group arrived at a small hill 800 meters away. The terrain here was open, and there was little vegetation covering it. However, there was a depression on the top of the mountain, and a part of the mountain wall extended out to block it. In the middle of the depression, there was a small spring, which was a natural campsite. Liang Shixian said, without speaking about other matters, I'm impressed by your ability to lead the way. Jiruo grinned. I'm a gold-class tour guide. This is nothing. Liang Shixian was amused. You're taking what I said as courtesy for real. The few of them squatted by the spring and washed the blood-red rice, performing a simple process of removing the shell. Due to the lack of tools, the few of them directly rubbed it with their hands. Fortunately, the blood-red rice grains were larger than ordinary rice grains. Although it was a little troublesome, it was still acceptable. Furthermore, this blood-red rice was also very beneficial to martial arts cultivation. Everyone was thrilled. As night fell, the few of them rubbed from evening to late at night. They were so hungry that they saw stars. Finally, they rubbed enough for a meal. The young men's fingers were stained with blood that would take a long time to wash off. Then, they encountered a new problem. How do I cook this? Do we directly eat it raw? Lu Neng asked, feeling a little embarrassed. Liang Shixian was also in a dilemma. They did not have a wok. Moreover, this was the top of the mountain, which was unsuitable for starting a fire. In the conventional sense, it was necessary to light a bonfire to set up camp in the wild, which could effectively avoid the invasion of wild beasts. However, it was different in the secret realm. There were all kinds of demonic beasts and demons here, and many of them were actually not afraid of fire. If they lit a fire at night, it might drive them away, but it could also attract danger. Jiruo thought for a while and gathered the prepared blood-red rice in front of him. He put his hand into the rice, barely enough to cover his palm. Don't worry. I have a plan. I know how to cook fried rice. Jiruo said in a mysterious tone. The group was at a loss for words, and everyone mused, what are you going to cook without a pot or fire? Then, they saw Jiruo put his hands into the prepared blood-red rice and began to stir-fried. Once again, they were taken aback. When Liang Shixian and the others saw the red glow on Jiruo's palms, they were dumbfounded. Is this how iron sand palm is used? They wondered. Young people like you are usually pampered and spoiled. You can't survive in the wild and can't even cook, Jiruo said as he started to stir-fry the blood-red rice in front of him. At first glance, Jiruo seemed to be using iron sand palm to stir-fry rice, but in fact, he was practicing the skill. Maybe it was because the quality of the blood-red rice was higher than that of the ordinary rice, but Jiruo was surprised to find that he could gain a proficiency point every time he stir-fried it. This was much faster than the previous 10 times of stir-frying to increase 1 point of proficiency. Liang Shixian and the others watched as Jiruo's palms turned redder and redder, and the surrounding temperature rose slowly. They were all confused. It is fine that he uses iron palm to stir-fry rice, but why did it feel like he is controlling the heat? Don't tell me he really wants to use iron sand palm to cook the blood rice. They didn't know that Jiruo was not controlling the fire, but he had indeed improved. Iron sand palm, originally at the advanced level, had gained a large amount of proficiency points after Jiruo's high-speed stir-frying. It had already broken through to the exemplary mastery level. Jiruo also realized that the iron sand palm that he had cultivated through the system seemed to be different from the ordinary iron sand palm. His skill seemed to have a setting of cooking rice. Under their dazed gazes, a faint sweet smell slowly entered everyone's nostrils. The blood rice that was originally slightly hard was gradually softening, and the grains became fuller and crystal clear. How can it really be cooked? Iron sand palm can be used in this way, they thought. When the martial arts examination is over, I want to learn iron sand palm, Zhang Quan muttered in a low voice. I also want to learn. Lu Neng agreed. Liang Shixian held the blood-red rice cooked by Jiruo and fell into deep thought. He kept feeling that something was wrong. Whether it was in the textbooks, the teacher's guidance, or the descriptions of iron sand palm on the internet, there did not seem to be any effect of using it to fry rice. Jiruo, this he said. Don't ask. It's just a starting if you ask, Jiruo said with a smile. He knew what Liang Shixian wanted to ask. This was a tacit understanding between two top students. All right, Liang Shixian said. Liang Shixian sighed. Although he was very confused, it was not good to ask about other people's secrets. Eat it while it's hot. It won't taste good when it's cold. Jiruo grabbed a handful of blood-red rice and stuffed it into his mouth. The other three followed suit, not caring about their image or the dust on the blood-red rice. On the one hand, they were really hungry. On the other hand, although they were only high school students, they were all martial artist reserve players after all, so they could still withstand some pressure. Those who practiced martial arts were not pretentious people. Burp. How comfortable. The blood-red rice was divided among them. Jiruo rubbed his stomach and leaned against the mountain wall, feeling the warmth in his stomach slowly flowing into his limbs and bones. Even though he did not eat any meat, his vitality was already full, even more than before. Jiruo was satisfied. After a short rest, Jiruo got up and started to practice basic body fist and leg movements. He practiced them one by one. Although these basic martial arts techniques taught in high schools did not have any special effects, they could relax the muscles, toughen the bones, and assist in digestion. As he practiced, the blood-red rice in Jiruo's stomach was digested. The warm current turned into a warm current, causing a faint mist to rise from Jiruo's head. The martial apprentice experience pill was indeed worthy of its name. After taking it, Jiruo felt that his strength as a level 6 martial apprentice was slowly increasing. The remaining blood-red rice was enough for 1 or 2 days. It was just that the area of this mountain valley was not very large, and Jiruo could not fully display his martial arts. Night gradually fell. After stretching, the few of them arranged the night watch order and planned to rest. However, at this moment, a shrill cry suddenly echoed from the distance, frightening them. God damn it! Who did this? Jiruo looked in the direction of the sound. It seemed to be coming from the blood-red rice field. It was already 800 meters away and he could still hear it. How loud did it have to shout? Was it an imported voice, he mused. Where's my blood-red rice? Where's my big piece of blood-red rice field? What? The owner of the shrill cry could not take the blow and started crying loudly. Jiruo even suspected that this guy had mastered some kind of sound-type martial technique, which was extremely powerful. Jiruo said, see, I was right, wasn't I? If we leave the rice stalks for them, they'll definitely be moved to tears if they know. The rest of the group was at a loss for words and thought, how is it freaking moved? Liang Shixian held back his strong desire to retort back and called for the few of them to hide under the protruding mountain wall. They hid in the shadows of the mountain wall. The miserable shrieks that spread far and wide startled a large number of birds in the forest. People who disturbed people's dreams were not welcomed anywhere. Some of the more hot-tempered demonic beasts and demons were directly angered, and they cried out and gathered toward the source of the sound. No one knew what the wailing goblin was thinking when it saw numerous demonic beasts and devils approaching it. It cried and roared, it's you guys, isn't it? It was definitely you guys. You must have stolen the blood-red rice that our tribe painstakingly planted. Little ones, grab your weapons and kill them. Then, the screams became more complicated. Jiruo and the others did not know what was happening because they were quite far away, but they guessed that the situation was not very harmonious. The loud-voiced goblin cried, "God damn it! Our tribe was so frugal that we weren't even willing to take a bite of the prey we hunted. We used them all to nourish the blood-red rice, and you guys actually stole them all. If you cut off our tribe's path to advancement, we'll suffer, but you won't have an easy time either. Today, I'm going to take you down with me." Jiruo's expression turned strange. Is this loud voice the goblin leader? I suddenly have a feeling that if we go there again tomorrow, everyone will be able to get into a good university. The three of them were speechless. Didn't the teacher say that the combat examination was very dangerous, they thought. Jiruo looked at their expressions and was a little unhappy. What's with the look in your eyes? You've all heard how fierce the battle is over there. There must be a lot of casualties tonight. Those were all martial arts examination scores. And it's ownerless, it's such a pity to just leave it. Although they were devils and demonic beasts, they had taken the blood-red rice that they had painstakingly cultivated, and now they had to use their corpses to get their exam marks. Isn't this a little unkind, they pondered. Chapter 9. None of them slept well that night. The sounds of battle and screams continued, and they seemed to be getting closer and closer. Everyone, including Jiruo, was extremely nervous. The conditions of this campsite were pretty good in all aspects, but the open terrain was both an advantage and a disadvantage. When there was no danger, they could observe the situation around them from the slightly higher terrain of the hill. However, once danger came, there was no place to hide on this mountain peak. If they were exposed, they would have nowhere to run and could only be live targets. Fortunately, although the chaotic sounds were getting closer and closer, they did not affect the few people on the mountain top. With their hearts in their mouths, the chaos continued until dawn. It seems to have stopped. Do you want to go and take a look? Jiruo asked in a low voice. This idea was actually a little dangerous, but even if he didn't look, the strong smell of blood left behind by the chaos had already drifted up with the mountain wind. If he continued to stay here, it was likely that he would be discovered by other demonic beasts or devils that came to look for food. It was fine if there were only a few demonic beasts and devils, but once the enemy's numbers increased, they would be waiting for death if they stayed here. Liang Shixian understood this, but he was still hesitant. How about we go down the mountain from the other side? Let's not go there to collect points. What if something happens? Before the start of the martial arts examination, all the candidates, teachers, and parents, had been repeatedly reminded that safety was the first priority. Jiruo thought for a while and said, "Let's take a look. Those demonic beasts and devils are coming to our campsite. If something goes wrong, we can run away." It was not that Jiruo was not careful, but he had been using absolute directional sense to find a safe direction the whole night. When the chaos continued, the safe direction was very vague, and the 5% direction correction effect of absolute directional sense was almost useless. But now, absolute directional sense gave Jiruo a feeling that it was pointing in the direction of the chaos. In other words, it was theoretically safe to go from here. Of course, he still had to be careful. After all, the effect of direction correction was only 5%. Class president, that's a free score. Liang Shixian's mouth twitched and thought, what does he mean by free martial arts test scores? After hesitating for a moment, Liang Shixian finally gritted his teeth and said, "All right, let's just take a look." Jiruo thought that this was probably the effect of the title diplomatic spokesperson. The few of them tied up the rest of the blood-red rice with their school uniforms and carried it on their backs. Then, they carefully walked down the mountain. The hill was only about 100 meters high, and the slope was not very steep. Under normal circumstances, they could run down the hill in a few seconds with their strength as level 6 martial apprentices. However, they could not do that now as they had to be careful. Therefore, it took them nearly an hour to cover the short distance of 100 meters. When they arrived at the foot of the mountain, Zhang Quan and Lu Neng saw the hellish scene and vomited on the spot. Although the apprentice-level exam candidates who were trained under the standard education were not exactly flowers in a greenhouse to a certain extent, and everyone had seen blood before. However, before the start of the martial examination, the most they did was to personally kill some chickens, ducks, fish, and pigs. Moreover, because they were all personally doing it, the wounds were very regular and not disgusting. But now, in the conventional sense, there were no rules to speak of in the battle between demonic beasts and devils. They had all sorts of strange weapons, either simple stone tools or simply hard stones. What was more was that they liked to use their body parts to attack most of the time. For example, sharp teeth, sharp claws, sharp beaks, and hard horns. All in all, There were about 200 demonic beasts and devils that had died here. The green-skinned goblins made up the majority of the casualties. Most of the dead demonic beasts and devils had dismembered limbs or their internal organs scattered on the ground. The strong smell of blood was mixed with a large number of strange smells, which were both eye-stinging and head-piercing. Coupled with the visual impact, Zhang Quan and Lu Neng vomited on the spot. Liang Shixian and Ji Ruo did not vomit, but they did not look too good. Ji Ruo did not know why Liang Shixian did not vomit, but he wanted to vomit himself. However, he thought that it would be a pity to vomit because it was his first time eating such a high-end ingredient like blood-red rice, so he suppressed his desire to vomit. It seems like they're all dead, Ji Ruo said in a low voice. Then, he picked up the dead body of a demonic beast that looked like a gopher and started to collect them to record his score. The others were still in a daze. Ji Ruo frowned. What are you doing? Make a move. You guys want to see me get into a famous martial arts school, is it? Hurry up and run after you're done recording. Otherwise, we won't be able to escape when the smell of blood attracts other demonic beasts. Ah. Oh. Oh. It was only then did the few of them start to move. A corpse could only be uploaded once. Now that there was no signal on the watch, it could only store information, so it could be recorded again. However, after the martial arts examination was over and all the data was uploaded, if the AI system found out that a demonic beast's corpse had been uploaded multiple times, it would be judged as cheating. The combat examination didn't prohibit team cooperation, but it prohibited multiple people from uploading the corpse of a demonic beast and devil. That kind of behavior was not within the scope of normal teamwork. Fortunately, there were a lot of corpses here. They divided it into 4 areas and each person recorded one area. Although Zhang Quan and Lu Neng had already activated the help function on their wristwatches, the martial artists on patrol had yet to arrive. In theory, they were still in the middle of the examination. These points could still be counted for them. When the martial arts examination ended, if they were still alive, they could all go to university. As Ji Ruo had said, these were like free points, and although it was a little disgusting, it was very fun to pick them up. However, Ji Ruo frowned. Because he found something familiar in the blood-red ground. It was blood-red rice stalks. Who would pick up rice straws in a chaotic battle? Could this be the original location of the blood-red rice field, he wondered. However, that position was clearly close to 800 meters away from the small hill they were hiding in. Could it be the ground can move, he continued thinking. As Ji Ruo was picking up the items, he was shocked by his own thought. If that was the case, then their situation, he mused. Who's there? Suddenly, a weak voice made Ji Ruo shiver. He looked towards the source of the sound and saw a muscular goblin lying in a pool of blood. One of its legs was missing, and the other was also irregularly twisted. There was a huge wound on his abdomen, and his internal organs could be seen wriggling slowly. He was on the verge of death. Save me, I don't want to die, the goblin said weakly. He did not even have the strength to lift his head, so he did not know that the sound he heard was the arrival of a human. Ji Ruo raised his eyebrows. This goblin was dying. In theory, there was a deep hatred between humans and demons, so Ji Ruo should not interfere. However, Ji Ruo was a good kid. How could a good child leave the goblin in the lurch? Ji Ruo ran to the muscular goblin and pretended to be anxious. My fellow townsman. Fellow townsman, are you all right? I'm Ji Ruo, a martial arts trainee who has been practicing martial arts for 2.5 years. The goblin's eyes were dazed, but his strong desire to live forced him to reach out to Ji Ruo. I beg you. Save me. Fellow townsman, don't worry. I've learned first aid before, I can definitely save you. Ji Ruo said seriously. Then, he squatted beside the goblin and pressed his hands on its chest. My fellow townsman, this first aid method is called cardiopulmonary resuscitation. I usually see people getting injured on TV and other people save them this way. Don't be afraid. I'm here. Ji Ruo's palms turned red. Apparently, he had used iron sand palm. Then, he pressed down hard. The goblin's eyes widened, and his chest was squeezed by a huge force. A large amount of tissues sprayed out from the huge wound on his abdomen. Why you? Without knowing what the goblin was trying to say, he died before he could finish his sentence. Ji Ruo was a little regretful. It's a pity that I didn't learn enough skills to save him, but don't worry, my fellow townsman, you will become my score in the martial arts test and return triumphantly with me. Then, Ji Ruo scanned the goblin on his watch and turned it into his score. Beep. Congratulations on killing the goblin lord. Ji Ruo was stunned and wondered, a voice broadcast? I'm quite lucky. Chapter 10. In Bactria, the combat examination had only started for half a day, but it was already forcefully terminated. This was an annual event for humans and involved many people who did not have children. Every year's martial arts examination would involve almost all the industries in Bactria. However, this year's combat examination was a little different. A large-scale geological movement had suddenly occurred in the secret realm of Myriad Beast Mountain, and the safety zones that had been previously divided by humans were all messed up. Although they had been discovered in time, how could a group of high school examins enter the secret realm of Myriad Beast Mountain, which was in a chaotic state? Half a day had already passed when the Education Division discovered the problem. In the following half a day, the news of the martial arts examination's end and the problem with the examination venue swept through all walks of life like a storm. The scope was too wide, and this news could not be hidden at all. After all, there were also employees' children in the various divisions of Bactria who were participating in this year's martial arts examination. The college entrance examination candidates were just a group of reserve martial apprentice martial artists. After passing the martial examination and entering the secret realm with the secret realm teleportation device, they could only wait 7 days for the teleportation device to open again before being pulled back by the mark of the present world. In less than 7 days, their bodies would not be able to withstand multiple teleportations in a short period of time. The upper echelons of Bactria activated the secret realm teleportation device of the highest grade and sent a large number of cultivators to the Myriad Beast Mountain secret realm to rescue the examins. Almost all of the cultivators in Bactria who had reached a certain level of strength had been mobilized. They had entered the secret realm of Myriad Beast Mountain at the first opportunity to provide assistance. Millions of cultivators had spent the entire night searching the area controlled by the original humans in the secret realm of Myriad Beast Mountain, and they had successfully rescued 768,361 examins. This number was not even half of the total number of examins in this combat examination. After all, the scope of the combat examination was the entire Bactria. This was even if the problem had been discovered in time. Otherwise, the number of examins who had been saved would be even fewer. Because of the large-scale geological changes, the geographical location of Myriad Beast Mountain secret realm was constantly changing. The basic network of the secret realm set up by humans had completely collapsed, and it was no longer possible to locate the position of every single candidate through the wristwatches of the candidates. After more than 760,000 examins were rescued, the remaining examins were scattered all over the place. There was even a portion of them who had met with mishaps. The large-scale geological changes had also forced some powerful demon beasts and devils out of their original territories, which had a great impact on the rescue operation. A large number of the martial artists who were originally on patrol had also gone missing. The director of the Education Division walked through the forest. With the powerful perception of a martial artist, he constantly monitored the situation within a 3-mile radius. Once he found any candidates nearby, he would immediately go to rescue them and send them back to the main world. He had been running non-stop for half a day and a night. During this period, he encountered powerful demonic beasts and successfully saved many examins. Running, perception, battle, rescue. For half a day and a night, his mind had been in a highly tense state. Even with his current realm, he was already very tired. But he could not stop, nor did he dare to stop. Because if he stopped, those examins who had yet to be found would most likely die in the mouths of demon beasts or demonic creatures. His time was interconnected with their lives. For such a huge mistake to occur in the martial exam, he, as the education secretary, could not absolve himself from the blame. No matter what punishment it was, he could accept it. But now, when he thought of the large number of young examins who might be in danger, he could not stop. At the very least, he had to save more. In half a day and one night, the director of the Education Division had saved nearly 7,000 candidates with his powerful strength. But it was still not enough. There were still close to 60% of the examins who had not been found. He still couldn't stop. Children, I'm sorry. You have to hold on. The director of the Education Division felt so guilty that he almost drowned in his guilt. On the first day of the combat examination, at the end of the night, he had saved nearly 7,000 examins. However, on the second day, it was already close to noon, and he had only managed to save nearly 300 people. It wasn't that he wasn't strong, but that the secret realm of Myriad Beast Mountain was just too big, and the remaining examins were too scattered. In addition to that, the secret realm of Myriad Beast Mountain was still undergoing extremely secretive and large-scale geological changes, causing its geographical location to constantly change, making the difficulty of the rescue even greater. In Yonkers First High School, in the classroom of grade 12 class 4, the class teacher, Li Bingdao, stood on the podium with deep fatigue in his eyes. His body carried a strong smell of blood that was difficult to disperse. He had also participated in this rescue. However, because of his growing age and the serious injuries he had suffered in his early years, his vitality was not strong enough. Li Bingdao was forced to return to the main world after only holding on for half a night. Even though Li Bingdao wanted to continue saving them, he knew that if he continued, he might become someone who needed to be saved. That would only cause more trouble for the rescue mission, so he wisely retreated. Fortunately, the students in his class seemed to have good luck. By dawn, almost all the students in his class had been rescued. Although there were still traces of fear on their faces, it was a good thing that they were not dead. Students, I know that you are very afraid and want to go home, but you can't. Li Bingdao's voice was a little hoarse as he said, we still have 2 students who haven't returned yet. Please wait in school for a while. Li Bingdao was trying his best to calm the students down and had them wait in the school for a while. When the rescue operation was over, he would calculate the casualties. It was the same for the other classes. The students who had been rescued sat quietly in their classrooms, recalling the terrifying scene they had encountered in the secret realm of Myriad Beast Mountain, waiting. Some of the teachers who were not suitable for the rescue mission or had already exhausted a large amount of their vitality and were unable to carry out the rescue mission were doing their best to calm the students' emotions. There were a total of 46 students in grade 12 class 4, and 44 of them had returned. Li Bingdao looked at the only 2 empty seats in the classroom as he comforted the students. There were still 2 students who had not returned. The class monitor, Liang Shixian, and Ji Ruo. There's a voice broadcast? Not bad, this one is enough for an undergraduate, Ji Ruo muttered happily. Normally, the martial exam grounds would be cleaned before the exam began. In theory, the examines would only encounter demonic beasts or demons that were lower than or equal to the strength of a level 6 martial apprentice. However, it was not absolute. There would still be some special situations, such as some demonic beasts and demons breaking through to a higher level temporarily, or high-level demonic beasts and demons from other areas entering randomly. In the martial arts examination, similar situations were called out-of-scope questions. In previous years, out of the 3% mortality rate, close to 30% of them had encountered questions that were beyond their scope. It was definitely dangerous, but if he could kill them successfully, the rewards would naturally be very high. The way to calculate the score for the combat examination was a little complicated. However, according to Ji Ruo's understanding, a question beyond the syllabus was equivalent to getting 150 points in a certain college entrance exam in his previous life. That was to get a full score in an exam. An ordinary Goblin Lord was equivalent to a level 8 martial apprentice under normal circumstances. This one could even speak the human language, so its strength must be higher, perhaps even reaching the level of a 9th grade martial apprentice. Of course, Ji Ruo was thrilled. Ji Ruo was only estimating the strength of this Goblin Lord. He wasn't sure how strong the Goblin Lord was. After all, when he met this goblin, he was already on the verge of death. Even if Ji Ruo did not hit him with the iron sand palm, this goblin wouldn't have lived for long. Therefore, Ji Ruo did not know what level this goblin was at. He only knew one thing, and that was that this goblin had triggered the voice broadcast on his wristwatch. It must be an out-of-class test question. Chapter 11. On the chest of the Goblin Lord's corpse, there were 2 charred palm prints, and the palm prints were abnormally clear. It was the burn mark caused by the high temperature of Ji Ruo's iron sand palm at the mastery level. Strictly speaking, iron sand palm was not a set of palm techniques with specific rules. It was essentially a buff-type martial technique. It has a high temperature, toughness, strength increase, and other characteristics. After adding the state, it can hit however it wants. It could even be used as a slap. What a pity. Liang Shixian was recording his free martial arts examination score as he sighed, if we were to sell the materials from these demonic beasts and devils, we would make a lot of money. Unfortunately, we don't have the time or energy to collect them. After a night of chaos, there were a large number of corpses here. They looked extremely miserable and the smell of blood was extremely strong. It was okay to pick up the points, but it would take a lot of time to collect the materials. During this time, no one could be sure whether there would be demonic beasts and devils attracted by the strong smell of blood, so they could not stay here for too long. Don't worry, we still have to stay in the secret realm for 6 days, there will be plenty of opportunities, Ji Ruo said with a smile. There were more than 200 different kinds of demonic beasts and devils here, and some of them were not completely dead yet. Ji Ruo took the trouble to give them iron sand palm one by one. At the same time, he also took the initiative to greet the other party before smacking them to death. The enhancement effect of the title of diplomatic spokesperson was also increased by 5%. Lu Neng and Zhang Quan were also used to the blood on the ground. They were recording the scores while chatting with Ji Ruo and Liang Shixian. Never in my wildest dreams did I expect that the martial arts examination could be so easy, said Zhang Quan. Lu Neng agreed. That's right, I can eat blood red rice and even pick up free points. Ha ha ha. Free points. This way of phrasing it is really interesting. Ji Ruo, it's all thanks to you guys this time. Ji Ruo smiled and was about to reply. The 5% safe direction that was corrected by absolute directional sense suddenly became unusually blurry. Ji Ruo was stunned. Although 5% was not much, it was still effective. Why did it suddenly become so blurry? Buzz. 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 At this moment, a series of buzzes sounded, and Jiruo's expression changed. He saw hundreds of human head-sized wasps flying over from the distance at an extremely fast speed. Stop picking up points. Run. Jiruo yelled and spun around, choosing his direction. In the blink of an eye, Jiruo had roughly compared his instinct of the different directions and chose the safer one. This way. Without any hesitation, Jiruo ran. The other three did not react as quickly as Jiruo. By the time they could react, the human head-sized wasps were already within 100 meters. Stinger demon bees. Liang Shixian cried out in shock, turned around, and ran. Stinger demon bees were low-level devils. An adult stinger demon bee's average strength was between a level 2 and 3 martial apprentice. Although its defense was weak, it was extremely mobile. Moreover, these things lived in groups. Not only that, as a flying monster, the main attack of this thing was to shoot tail spikes. They had an ammunition warehouse in their bodies, which stored 6 to 9 tail spikes. The stinger was as thick as an adult's pinky and was highly toxic. These devils did not feed on pollen or honey like ordinary wasps, but were omnivorous. Liang Shixian was almost certain that these hundreds of stinger demon bees were attracted by the strong smell of blood. The few of them followed Jiruo and ran in a direction. They did not know where they were, but there was no way they could turn around with the swarm of stinger demon bees behind them. Don't be afraid. Their target should be the dead body over there. They won't attack us for the time being. We just need to run a little further, Jiruo said as he ran. He could hear the wind blow past him as he talked, but he did not know if the other three could hear him. The stinger demon bee's target was the corpses of the demonic beasts and devils on the ground. Although there were hundreds of stinger demon bees, each as big as a human head, their wings could not support them. Therefore, when they passed by the corpses, more than 90% of the stinger demon bees landed and worked together to transport their food. However, there were still a dozen that didn't stop and continued to chase after Jiruo and the others. Tisk. These guys still want to eat fresh ones. Jiruo turned around and cursed. The 4 teenagers were running on the ground. Even if they were level 6 martial apprentices, they were still not as fast as those who were flying in the sky. As for the stinger demon bees, they would shoot their stingers when they were within a certain distance. The fate of the 4 youths seemed to have already been decided. Suddenly, Liang Shixian gritted his teeth and stood still. He growled, I've learned the iron skin technique. You guys go first, I'll cover. What nonsense are you talking about? Jiruo shouted, do you think your iron skin can withstand the tail of this thing? Hurry up and run. Liang Shixian stood still and turned around to face the stinger demon bees. They can fly, and we don't have any long-range attacks. If we keep running, we'll only die under the poisonous tail stingers. We can't all die here, can we? If one could escape, it was better. There had to be someone to cover the rear. When the exam is over, help me tell my teacher that I'm afraid I won't be able to hand in my last homework. Hearing this, Jiruo gritted his teeth and stopped. Even so, it's not your turn to cover the rear. Why can't I get my turn? Liang Shixian took a deep breath, and his skin started to turn gray. It was the iron skin at the beginner level. Liang Shixian's gaze was firm as he faced the stinger demon bees and said, I'm the class president, after all. As he spoke, a dozen stinger demon bees had already flown into the range of the stinger attack. They straightened their stingers and fired a round of shots. Quickly run. Liang Shixian roared. Jiruo turned around and ran. For the first time, he drew the standard sword on his back. There are no girls here, who are you acting cool for? Jiruo growled. He recalled the description and demonstration of a certain sword art he had seen in novels and TV shows in his previous life. Although the demonstration on the TV was not real, Jiruo still remembered the description in the novel. Besides, he had the sword appreciation buff, which raised his understanding of the sword to the limit. Although it was only the beginner level of sword appreciation, it was enough. In an instant, Jiruo understood and mastered the sword technique. Liang Shixian was stunned for a second when Jiruo came to his side. Then he became angry. What are you doing back here? Go quickly. I said I'll bring cover you all. I said, it's not your turn to cover the rear. Jiruo listened to the wind to determine the position, staring at the dozens of poisonous stingers, the long sword in his hand drawing a mysterious trajectory. Besides, what kind of martial artist are you if you're afraid of death? Broken arrow form. Ding. Ding. The mysterious sword skill formed a 3-foot sword defense around Jiruo, blocking all the poisonous stingers. None of them could break through Jiruo's 3-foot sword defense. When Liang Shixian saw this, he subconsciously dispelled the effects of the iron skin technique and was dumbfounded. He looked at the sword in Jiruo's hand, then at the swords on Jiruo's back. He remembered what Jiruo had said, and his mouth was wide open. Jiruo, why you really have knife and sword ambidexterity. This was not the basic sword technique that was taught in school. Moreover, what kind of sword technique was broken arrow form? I have never even heard of it before, he thought. Chapter 12. Liang Shixian was dumbfounded as he looked at Jiruo waving his sword. Zhang Quan and Lu Neng had already run far away. Liang Shixian had heard of sword techniques that could block hidden weapons or other flying tools. However, even the lowest level of cultivation for those sword techniques had to be in the pulsing realm. No martial apprentice could cultivate such a sword technique. This was because all of those sword techniques required the assistance of strong eyesight. To put it nicely, the martial apprentice realm was the reserve for martial artists. In fact, in this world where everyone valued martial arts, even an ordinary person who was physically unsuitable for practicing martial arts could have the strength of a martial apprentice realm after long-term training. Therefore, in theory, the martial apprentice realm was still the level of ordinary people. A martialist in the pulsing realm could open up meridians, allowing themselves to truly possess vitality. The so-called vitality was energy and spirit. It was very direct. Vitality was the foundation of a martial artist's transcendence. Only by truly possessing the power of vitality could one further unearth the treasures of the human body and open up the path of evolution known as the martial arts. At that time, all aspects of the human body would improve at a terrifying speed. Defense, strength, speed, reaction, dynamic vision, and so on would all be greatly improved. To practice a sword technique that could block arrows or other flying tools, one must have a strong dynamic vision. After all, you couldn't even see the flying arrows, so how could you block them? However, the sword technique that Jiruo was using was different. It gave Liang Shixian a feeling that it was completely different from the sword techniques that he knew could block flying items. Those sword techniques were extremely fast, but Jiruo's sword technique was not fast. In fact, it was a little slow. Of course, this was only relative. In fact, Jiruo's sword moves were not that slow. Moreover, compared to the other sword techniques that were used to defend, Jiruo's sword technique did not have sword energy and was not fast, but it seemed to be more exquisite. He would always swing his sword to a certain position before the poisonous stingers hit him. It felt like the stinger demon bees were throwing their stingers at Jiruo's sword. It was absurd. Clang. After the last stinger was cut down, the first round of 16 stingers was all cut down by Jiruo. Just as Liang Shixian was about to say something, he saw that the second wave of poisonous stingers had already been filled and was shooting toward him. We'll talk later. Let's go. Jiruo bent down and picked up 7 or 8 poisonous stingers. He put them into his pocket and used the arrow-breaking move again. A stinger demon bee could store 6 to 9 stingers in its sting container. Jiruo could rely on the beginner level of the Solitude 9 swords, broken arrow style to block the stingers. Once the other stinger demon bees realized that the corpses wouldn't move and decided to kill them first, they would be in danger. After all, the broken arrow move didn't rely on its powerful dynamic vision to block flying props, but on prediction. By listening to the wind to determine the position and order of the flying prop, he could calculate and predict the order of attack, and then resolve it with exquisite sword moves. Jiruo could barely deal with a dozen stinger demon bees, but if hundreds of them came at him at the same time, he wouldn't even be able to hear them clearly. Naturally, he couldn't calculate and predict the order. If the stinger demon bees realized that they had to kill those who knew how to run, Jiruo and the others would still die here. Liang Shixian also realized this. He was not a pretentious person, so he did not say anything about covering for him. He only said, "Be careful." He then turned around and ran away. Liang Shixian seemed to be prepared to die, but he was still a young man. He was still afraid to face death. Moreover, Jiruo's swordsmanship also showed who was more suitable to cover them in this situation, so Liang Shixian ran away. Seeing Liang Shixian leave, Jiruo quickly retreated while blocking the poisonous stingers with the broken arrow. They fought while they ran. The second wave, the third wave, the fourth wave. The stinger demon bees would pause for a moment when they fired their stingers. Moreover, with each shot, they would become weaker and their flying speed would slow down. Normally, with fewer stingers, their weight would be reduced, and their flying speed should be faster. But in fact, these devils were not machines. The biological limitations made them lose weight and consume a lot of physical strength, so their flying speed also decreased. Jiruo and the others ran further away. In the process, Jiruo even grabbed the poisonous thorn with his free hand and put it into his pocket. The crickets were poisonous and could be used to make special arrows, which could be sold for money. As long as the poison on the tail didn't come into contact with the wound, it would be fine. The 16 stinger demon bees flew slower and slower, and Jiruo and the others ran further and further away. At this moment, the stinger demon bees finally realized which side they should kill first. Other than the bees that were transporting the food, a large number of them flew toward the direction where Jiruo and the others had left. The buzzing noises sounded again, but when they caught up with the 16 stinger bees, Jiruo and the others were gone. Because they had to face the martial arts examination, in addition to some fighting techniques, the martial arts teaching in high school also focused on the cultivation of escaping ability. Martial artists had to press forward with indomitable will, but their lives were equally important. After all, only by surviving could they talk about other things. At the peak of Myriad Beast Mountain was the center of the entire secret realm, and it was also a place that humans had never explored. There were very powerful demonic beasts and demons here. They occupied the land and ruled the mountains. There were conflicts between them from time to time, and the neighbors were not harmonious. But today, a group of great demons had gathered together, which was a rare sight. They were discussing something with another group of powerful demons who also lived on the mountaintop. Every single one of them was the size of a mountain, and they exuded terrifying energy fluctuations. "You still haven't found that D***MN cat?" a huge toad asked in a deep voice. There was a bright moon on its back, and as time passed, the moon's shape was slowly changing. "No, I didn't." A similarly huge one-eyed giant shook its head slightly. Its huge eye, which took up 2/3 of its face, seemed to contain a blazing sundae. "Damn cat! It killed the slumbering worm and stole its ability. It has been modifying the terrain of Myriad Beast Mountain, so it's very difficult for us to find it. It's alright. It's already seriously injured. It's also constantly using its stolen ability to modify the terrain because it's afraid of being caught by us. It can't hold on for long. We can wait until it's exhausted before we look for it." Hearing this, the giant toad with the moon on its back snorted. "It's easier said than done. It didn't steal your treasure, so of course, you're not in a hurry. My moon essence mirror has already been stolen by it. What if it leaves Myriad Beast Mountain through the moon essence mirror?" The one-eyed giant pondered for a moment and said, "It probably doesn't have the extra power to open the moon mirror. It's trying to change the entire terrain of Myriad Beast Mountain except for the peak. It also has to hide its aura. Plus, it's heavily injured." I hope so. Chapter 13. Let's go. Let's go. Let's hold hands. Let's go. Let's go. Let's go traveling. After escaping from the stinger demon bees, Jiruo and the others slowed down. After all, if they kept running, they would make a lot of noise and attract unnecessary trouble. Jiruo was in a good mood and even started to sing a nursery rhyme. He had collected a total of 35 stinger demon bee stingers. According to the market price, he could sell them for about $35,000. A single stinger could only be used to create one special arrow with deadly poison. The stinger itself could be sold for $1,000. This price was not exaggerated. Although the toxicity of this poisonous thorn may not have much effect on some higher-level demon beasts or demons, it would still have a little effect. At a critical moment, it could turn defeat into victory because of this little effect. Therefore, this thing never lacked a market. In other words, there was no lack of market for any materials, precious medicine, and minerals obtained from the bodies of demonic beasts and demons. All the people valued martial arts, and all materials related to martial arts were in urgent need. "Jiruo, your sword art." After hesitating for a long time, Liang Shixian finally couldn't hold back his curiosity and asked hesitantly. He knew that this might be Jiruo's secret and it would not be good to ask about it, but he could not help it. That sword skill was too exquisite. It actually blocked all the poisonous stingers, and none of them broke through the sword defense. Liang Shixian had never seen or heard of such a sword technique. Now that he was safe, the curiosity in his heart was like dozens of kittens scratching at him. It was really hard to bear. He knew how to take care of Jiruo's feelings and that it was not good to ask about other people's secrets, but Liang Shixian was still a young man. Curiosity and the desire for knowledge were natural. "I created it myself. Isn't it amazing?" Jiruo laughed. The young man wasn't lying. Although the sword technique was still named the Solitude 9 Swords by the young man, it was not very similar to the original version. The buff sword appreciation, beginner, was ridiculously strong. Jiruo only had to recall the description of the sword skill in the original novel, and he immediately understood and mastered the corresponding sword skill. Not only that, but his swordsmanship was so skilled that it was as if Jiruo had practiced it for many years. For the first time in his life, Jiruo could control the sword with ease. Increase comprehension of sword-related methods to the current level to the maximum. This simple description meant the maximum level of comprehension of sword arts. Jiruo had comprehended a sword technique with just a few words. How terrifying was that? There was nothing wrong with him saying that he had created the sword style. After all, other than the theory of the sword style, all the sword moves and sword techniques had been created by Jiruo himself. Self-created. Liang Shixian's eyes widened. Even though he had already guessed it, he still found it hard to believe that he had really gotten the answer. There were many martial arts techniques in the apprentice stage, but most of them had the word foundation in them. It was really just the foundation. Powerful martial arts techniques could only be cultivated after one had the power of vitality. Otherwise, it would only be for show. Take Jiruo's iron sand palm as an example. Under normal circumstances, it was impossible for a martial apprentice to cultivate to the master level. Even if one could cultivate it to the advanced level, it was already a sign of talent. The high temperature, or even the burning property, required the support of vitality. Martial apprentices had a relatively weak understanding of martial arts. It was theoretically impossible to create their own martial arts techniques. Even if they did, they wouldn't be very strong. At least, they wouldn't be much stronger than those basic martial arts techniques. After all basic martial arts were what humans had concluded over the years. In theory, they had already reached a certain limit, and it was very difficult to make any further breakthroughs. The higher-ranked martial artists had enough understanding and perception of martial arts to create some powerful apprentice-level martial skills. However, he was already at such a high level, so wouldn't it be better to comprehend a higher-level martial technique? The marital apprentice level was just the transition stage before becoming an official martial warrior. That's not true. Jiruo raised his chin and gave himself a thumbs up. Have you forgotten what I told you before? I'm knife and sword ambidexterity. He really is knife and sword ambidexterity. Liang Shixian's mouth was wide open. Jiruo's swordsmanship was already incredible in his eyes, but this was just sword art. Liang Shixian looked at the unsheathed standard sword behind Jiruo and could not help but gulp. Liang Shixian suddenly felt that his class president position had been overshadowed. However, Jiruo was the one who had surpassed him, and he was convinced. After all, Jiruo's family background was no secret. He was able to maintain his grades, be the best in his class and even his age, and even create his own powerful sword techniques. Talent was important, but hard work was also indispensable. His parents were both dead, but he was able to reach this level just by relying on the government's relief funds. This was no longer something that could be expressed by pure talent. No matter how talented he was, practicing martial arts required resources. Jiruo's family situation meant that it was difficult for him to obtain any resources other than the most basic ones. At the very least, even with the annual scholarship, it would not be enough for Jiruo to buy the necessary medicinal liquid to cultivate the iron sand palm. If someone else was stronger than him, Liang Shixian might be jealous. But if this person was Jiruo, Liang Shixian would be convinced. He would only feel happy for Jiruo. At the same time, he would be encouraged by Jiruo to work harder and catch up. Liang Shixian said sincerely, Jiruo, the sword technique you created is really amazing. I really want to see your sword technique. It must be very powerful, right? Hee. There will be a chance. Jiruo chuckled and didn't continue the topic. He didn't know how to use the knife yet. Not only did Liang Shixian want to see it, but Jiruo also wanted to. Liang Shixian thought about it and hesitated. Jiruo, your sword art is so powerful. Will you consider selling it after the martial exam? He was thinking from Jiruo's point of view. If they were able to get a good result in this martial arts examination, the school would definitely reward them with some money. If the results were better, Yonkers's education division might also reward them. However, although the money was more than enough to pay for his college tuition, it would not improve Jiruo's family situation. As for selling self-created martial skills, even if it was only a martial apprentice skill, it was enough to let Jiruo live a good life in the future. After all, the sale of martial arts techniques was not a one-time deal. There would be a share of the copyright revenue in the future. The martial apprentices were known as the reserve martial artists. Everyone had to go through martial apprentice before they became a martial warrior. In theory, once Jiruo chose to sell his sword art, his customers would be everyone in Bactria. The revenue from the copyright was bound to be an unusually huge figure. However, not everyone would sell martial arts techniques. The appearance of each martial technique was the result of the creator's painstaking efforts. Whether to sell or not, it was entirely up to the individual's will. Not everyone loved money. Even in this era, there were people who cherished their own belongings. Liang Shixian was doing this for Jiruo's sake. Of course, there was another important reason. He also wanted to learn this sword technique. He could block flying tools without relying on his vitality. His swordsmanship was exquisite, light, and ethereal. How handsome would that be? If Jiruo agreed to sell it, he would ask his family to buy one for him as soon as possible. It was a reasonable way to help Jiruo, killing two birds with one stone. Liang Shixian was worried that Jiruo would not sell it. In that case, even though Liang Shixian would be disappointed, he would not try to persuade Jiruo. After all, it was his own choice. Yes, of course I'm selling. Jiruo didn't have any opinion on this. After all, he now had the blessing of sword appreciation, beginner. He could create as many similar sword skills as he wanted, so why not sell them? Liang Shixian was pleasantly surprised. Really? That would be great. Jiruo, I wish you a fortune in advance. Class president, you want to learn, don't you? Jiruo looked at Liang Shixian with a faint smile. Liang Shixian was a little embarrassed that his thoughts had been exposed. However, Jiruo chuckled and said, you want to learn? I'll teach you. I won't charge you. Chapter 14. Although it had been a few months since Jiruo transmigrated to this world, and he had already merged with the host's memories, Jiruo did not really accept the host's social relationship. Jiruo seemed to be very familiar with his classmates, but only Jiruo himself knew that these familiar classmates were strange to him. The original host's memory was still the original host's memory. In Jiruo's eyes, these familiar classmates were just the original host's familiar classmates. Earlier, when Liang Shixian, as the class president, had planned to lead by example and cover the retreat of Jiruo and the other ordinary students, Jiruo's heart had been shaken. That I'm the class monitor after all. It was like a heavy hammer that smashed the barrier in Jiruo's heart. Although Liang Shixian phrased it nicely, the result of staying behind to cover while they retreat was death. Did Liang Shixian not know? Of course, he knew. Even so, Liang Shixian still decided to bring up the rear. Even though he was also very afraid and even though his voice was trembling, he still used iron skin which he had just glimpsed the basics of. Jiruo was shocked. In the memories left behind by the original owner, there were many bits and pieces of his school days. Liang Shixian was not the only one who had helped Jiruo. Yonkers's grade 12 class 4 was very united, and there had never been any bullying. Liang Shixian's I'm the class president after all. It was like a sharp sword that pierced through the memory gap between the original host and Jiruo, forcefully merging Jiruo's life with the life of the original host. His memory became clear. At that moment, Jiruo suddenly felt that it was not bad to have a group of classmates like this. So he stopped, turned around, and walked forward. He comprehended the swordsmanship and faced the demonic creature. Liang Shixian wanted to learn swordsmanship, and Jiruo didn't plan to hold anything back. To Jiruo, this sword art was not particularly precious. Moreover, Liang Shixian exchanged his life for this. Even though Liang Shixian did not have the chance to face danger until the end, his courage to stop at the very beginning was worth Jiruo remembering this class president whom he had only known for a few months. Let's go this way. I'll teach you slowly on the way, Jiruo said as he tried to figure out the direction. Along the way, Jiruo had been showing the way, but absolute directional sense correction percentage didn't increase. Thinking about it, it would be unreasonable if such a powerful ability could be improved so easily. Yes. Liang Shixian nodded. Now, he had no doubt about Jiruo's ability to point the way. It had only been a day since the martial arts exam, and they had already graduated. Although luck played a big part, it was still because of Jiruo's guidance. In theory, if this was all luck, then it was all Jiruo's luck. As they walked, Jiruo taught Liang Shixian Solitude 9 Swords, broken arrow form. Liang Shixian learned it very seriously, but he did not let his guard down. At the same time, he was still on alert for any movements around him. Being in the secret realm of Myriad Beast Mountain, he could not be careless. Zhang Quan and Lu Neng looked at the two of them enviously, but they didn't get too close. They were able to survive until now all because of these two top students from other schools that they met on the way. They had been saved by Jiruo several times. Although Jiruo was a little immature and liked to sing songs that they had never heard before, he was very capable. Besides, Jiruo was a good man. He had brought two strangers with him to this day. When they were being chased by the stinger demon bees, Zhang Quan and Lu Neng had never stopped. Now, even if they wanted to learn Jiruo's swordsmanship, they were too embarrassed to ask. They slowed down a little, too embarrassed to learn Jiruo's sword technique. If they wanted to learn, they could buy it after the martial exam. Zhang Quan raised his wrist to take a look at his watch, but the distress message displayed on it remained unchanged. He frowned. Why is it so slow? A day had passed, but the martial artist invigilating the examination has not arrived yet. The teacher didn't say anything about this situation. Could there have been an accident? Lu Neng hesitated. Impossible. Zhang Quan's eyebrows raised. There won't be any demonic beasts or devils that can threaten a realm martial artist in the open area of the martial examination. Even if something happens to us, it's impossible for anything to happen to the patrolling martial artists. But why hasn't the martial artists on patrol found us after such a long time? Yeah, why? Zhang Quan was stunned for a moment. District. The director of the education division panted heavily as he identified the original sequence of the area in front of him through some traces. The humans divided Myriad Beast Mountain region into 60 regions, each named after the heavenly stem. I district was originally the second last region, and the danger index was extremely high. But now, because of a large-scale geological change, the last place, the J district, had been moved to an unknown place. The I district was no longer in its original position, but it had become the area closest to the mountainside. Simply put, outside the I district was an area that had never been controlled by humans. The second to last place became the first to last place. I hope there won't be any candidates here. The director of the education division took a deep breath. If any of the candidates were unlucky and were sent to this area, they would most likely be in trouble. He didn't have the power to bring the dead back to life. Even if he found it, he would only be collecting the candidates' corpses. Although this division chief had used his powerful strength to save thousands of candidates in a short day, many more candidates had already died. He had only returned the broken corpses of the candidates. Every time he saw a candidate's corpse, he would feel terrible. The secretary didn't stop and directly charged into I district. Although he didn't have much hope, he still had to search. Even if they couldn't rescue the students, they had to collect their corpses. Even if it was already the worst-case scenario, they couldn't let these young students be buried in a foreign land. Why is there such a strong smell of blood? Could it be the director was stunned? He increased his speed and was so fast that he appeared to be a bright stream of light, speeding in the direction of the smell of blood. In the blink of an eye, the director had crossed dozens of miles of the forest and saw the corpses of hundreds of dead beasts and monsters. Above the corpses, a large group of stinger demon bees was moving their bloody food. This purgatory-like scene didn't scare the chief. After all, he was very knowledgeable. It seems that the demons and monsters have a conflict due to some reason, causing chaos and eventually suffering losses on both sides. The strong smell of blood attracted the stinger demon bees. The division chief was deep in thought and didn't try to hide his presence, so he was quickly discovered by the stinger demon bees. The swarm of stinger demon bees had just let go of a few of their food that could run away, and new food was coming to their doorstep now. How could the stinger demon bees hold back? The bees immediately attacked the director. Umph. You don't know your place. The director snorted. He had seen too many deaths in a day's journey. He was both guilty and anxious. These stinger demon bees still dared to make the first move. It was simply looking for death. Heavenly steel palm. His vitality surged and the director struck out with his palm. The thick vitality transformed into a huge golden palm in the air, and the lines on the palm were clearly visible. The giant palm released an unusually strong suction force and sucked the hundreds of stinger demon bees into the palm. Then, it wiped them out with one palm. After dealing with the stinger demon bees, the division chief walked into the pile of corpses. Although he didn't have much hope, he still had to check if there were any traces of students or missing martial artists before leaving the I district. This was Iron Sand Palm. On the chest of one of the goblin leaders, the chief was surprised to find a pair of charred palm marks. The director was very familiar with the two marks. It was clearly left behind by the Iron Sand Palm. Chapter 15. There are candidates nearby? And they're still alive. The director was surprised. Although, besides a large number of examines, there were also many patrolling martial artists who had gone missing in Myriad Beast Mountain. However, most of the patrolling martial artists were only in the pulsing realm. There were too many dead demonic beasts and demons here, and there was no lack of level 9 martial apprentices among them. In a one-on-one fight, the martial artists on patrol would definitely have the advantage, but this number was not something that one or several martial artists on patrol could handle. Moreover, the fatal wounds on these demonic beasts or devils did not seem to be caused by humans, and the distribution of their corpses was irregular. Therefore, when the chaos began, there shouldn't have been any patrolling martial artists here. It would be even more impossible after the chaos ended. The most valuable things in this pile of corpses were the various materials from the demon beasts or devils. The director did a rough check and found that no materials from any demon beasts or devils had been collected. Therefore, in theory, no martial artist had ever stayed here. Then, the only possibility was that it was the examines. After all, these corpses were free martial arts test scores to the examines. They didn't need the materials, but they only needed to record their martial arts test scores. That's great. These children might still be alive. The director was overjoyed and began to carefully search the area. After a while, he found some stinger demon bees not far away. From the scattered distribution, these poisonous stingers were all shot in one direction, but they were all blocked by some means. There were even some messy-looking footprints. He could almost imagine how flustered the candidates were when they fled. There are 4 candidates. The director judged the number of candidates from the footprints and was even more surprised. He didn't know what methods these 4 examines had used to survive in I district, but it was obvious that the 4 little fellows were still alive. Hold on. I will bring you all home. The director activated his swan transport, and his body turned into a flying bird as he searched along the footprints. Along the way, he found some damaged clothing fibers on some shrubs. After a simple identification, he confirmed that they were made of materials used for high school uniforms. At this point, the footprints were no longer messy, which meant that they were out of danger. Good. They're all smart children. The director continued to follow the footprints. However, it didn't take long for the footprints to stop. What's going on? Where did the children go? The director frowned. The aura that was originally faint had completely disappeared here. Here, it was already completely out of human control and had already entered the mountainside range. All of you must survive. I will definitely find you. I'm telling you, you must be careful when you're surviving in the wild. Jiruo stood on the branch of a tree and said seriously, when we walk on the ground, we will leave behind footprints. This is equivalent to guiding the direction of those demonic beasts or devils that may be chasing us. Therefore, we can't walk on the ground. Those monsters who may have discovered our footprints and followed them will definitely not think that we can climb trees. I wouldn't expect it either. Liang Shixian agreed. As they were walking, Jiruo suddenly told them to climb up a tree and walk through the branches. They were slow, but they didn't leave any footprints. Presumably, those demonic beasts or devils who followed the footprints must be very confused when they saw the footprints stop abruptly. Jiruo couldn't help but laugh. Zhang Quan rubbed his green face in disgust and asked in confusion, I understand the logic, but why do we have to apply the sap of wild grass and leaves on our bodies? We were all stained with the smell of blood when we were picking up the points. Although it might be hard for us humans to notice it, it is the most obvious sign for some demonic beasts and devils with a keen sense of smell. If we don't cover it with the smell of plant juice, do you think we can still be so leisurely chatting here? In fact, what Jiruo didn't know was that if he didn't do so many things, they would be even more relaxed now. They might even be drinking coke now. However, if he had known, he would probably have still chosen to do so. This was because he had just triggered a new achievement. Congratulations for unlocking the function and achievements, Hide and Seek Expert. Acquired skill, Disguise. Disguise, increase disguise effect by 40%, lasts until the disguise is removed, no cost. Able to grow. Remark, understand the environment, blend in with the environment, and become the environment. Remarks, he. You can't see me. Jiruo, you know so much, Lu Neng said. He, not much, not much. I just know a little. Lu Neng and Zhang Quan were both speechless and thought, we don't know anything at all. We're really sorry. Jiruo looked at the time on his watch and said, it's almost time. Let's find a place to have lunch. They found a rock that was leeward as a temporary foothold and formed a circle, waiting for Jiruo to start cooking. There was no water source nearby, and it was daytime. Although the daytime creatures were not as bloodthirsty as the nocturnal creatures, they were not completely harmless. For safety reasons, they didn't peel the shells of the blood-red rice this time. As a level 6 martial apprentice, even if he was still a high school student, he was not pampered. Although the taste might be a little bad, it was not impossible to swallow rice that was not husked. In this case, it was good enough that they had something to eat. What a pity. I should have cut some meat and brought it here, Jiruo said with regret while frying the rice with both hands. There were so many corpses there just now. He could just get some and improve his food. Liang Shixian said, what's there to feel regretful about? We don't have the means to deal with those pieces of meat now. If we carry them with us, the smell of blood will only expose our location. Jiruo, you said it yourself. Jiruo laughed, I was just saying. As for meat, there's so much in this myriad beast mountain. We'll be here for another 5 days. There'll be plenty of opportunities. It's good that you have such a mindset. Lu Neng stared at the shelled blood rice being stir-fried between Jiruo's red hands. He was stunned. The teachers have repeatedly emphasized that the combat examination is extremely dangerous and that we must be very careful. If we're not careful, we'll die. Although I'm not good at studying, I still remember the sentence very clearly, but why do I feel like the actual situation is a little different from what the teachers said? Zhang Quan pursed his lips and said, that's right. We've already had lunch. And it's even blood-red rice. It feels like we're here on an outing. I've heard that many people die of hunger in the martial exam every year. He looked at his watch again and said, besides, didn't the teacher say that the martial artists would arrive in 2 hours at most after the distress signal was sent out? It's been a day. Why hasn't anyone come yet? Jiruo was also confused. You're right. I can't figure out what the problem is. It's so strange. Could it be a bug? Liang Shixian asked after some thought. Lu Neng checked his watch carefully, nodded, and said, I think so. Our wristwatches haven't been receiving any signal for a long time. Don't think too much. It's fine if the martial artists won't come. We're still safe for now, so we'll just be more careful. That's true. Jiruo said, let's eat. Everyone, hurry up and eat. We'll leave this place as soon as we're done. Then, Jiruo grabbed the cooked blood-red rice with the shell and stuffed it into his mouth, chewing it. As the young man ate, he muttered, this time's combat exam is too random. We haven't met any other candidates for so long. I thought we were playing a single-player game. I wonder how the other students were doing. Are they eating well? Or are they starving? Chapter 16. Students, it's time to eat. In Yonker's classroom of grade 12 class 4, the form teacher, Li Bingdao, looked a little haggard as he used his vitality to carry 44 boxes of food into the classroom. The martial arts examination was not over yet, and the rescue operation was still ongoing. All the rescued students did not go home, but were waiting in the classroom for their classmates who had not returned. The Education Division and the higher UPS of Bactria had discussed that this incident had brought about an indelible psychological shadow to the students, and they had to compensate them. Therefore, in the 7 days before the end of the combat examination, the meals of all the rescued students were specially provided by each city. They used the highest grade demonic beast meat, spirit energy vegetables, and nourishing herbs that a martial apprentice could bear. Even the rice was blood-red rice. It was a luxury. The higher UPS of the Education Division and Bactria did not care about the cost this time. They only wanted to make up for it a little and also to reduce the guilt in their hearts. There was a huge problem with the martial examination system. This sudden incident wasn't a coincidence. Even though the rescue operation was still ongoing and would continue until the end of the martial examination, the higher UPS of Bactria had already started to discuss the restructuring of the martial examination. The martial arts examination could no longer be held in the secret realm. Li Bingdao looked at the students who had yet to fully recover from their mental state, then at the 2 empty seats in the class and sighed. I wonder how Liang Shixian and Jiruo are doing, whether they're eating well, or if they're hungry. Run. Run quickly. Jiruo shouted as he ran in the forest. Their luck wasn't always that good. Not long after they finished eating, they encountered a group of 9-eyed magic spiders. This 9-eyed magic spider was a demonic creature at the level 9 martial apprentice. Its 8 legs were extremely sharp and as hard as rocks. Moreover, the 9-eyed magic spider's 9th eye could release a special magic ray that could slow down the target's movements. Once the target entered the range of 10 meters, it would be attacked. More importantly, these things also lived in groups. They didn't know why the demons in Myriad Beast Mountain liked to live in groups. In less than 2 days, Jiruo and the others had already encountered the third wave of demons. Jiruo. Hurry up and throw away that little wooden stick of yours. Look at what you've done. Liang Shixian roared. You can't blame me for this. Who knew that those spider webs were laid by the 9-eyed magic spider? If I had known, I would have run away halfway through it. Is that the main point? Liang Shixian yelled. Zhang Quan and Lu Neng didn't say a word. Their expressions were unusually ferocious, as if they were running with their lives. They didn't have the strength to speak. They felt that they might have lost all their hopes for the year in the next 2 days. They had been doing fine on the tree, and there had been no danger. But when Jiruo saw a spider web, he happily took his stick and went over to play with it. Then, the 9-eyed magic spider horde charged out. These 9-eyed magic spiders were the size of watermelons. They looked ferocious and terrifying as they pursued relentlessly. Then, a third. Jiruo shouted. Liang Shixian almost felt like vomiting blood. Don't you know what you did wrong? I know. Next time, I'll use my iron sand palm and burn all those spider webs. Can't you just ignore those spider webs? But if you don't clean the spider web, it's not hygienic. Liang Shixian rolled his eyes and was speechless. Jiruo had been using absolute directional sense to correct his direction. Although he could only get 5% of the correct effect each time, the effect was still quite obvious after several adjustments. Safe, safe. Safe, safe, Jiruo murmured. This way. Follow me. Fortunately, the 9-eyed magic spider's movement speed wasn't particularly outrageous. The 4 of them always maintained a distance of more than 10 meters from the magic spiders behind them, and weren't affected by the slowing magic eye. A moment later. There's a cave there. It should be safe, let's go in quickly. Jiruo shouted. Absolute directional sense gave him a hint that was pointing to that cave. What if it's a dead end inside dash? Before Liang Shixian could finish, Jiruo had already rushed into the cave. With the spiders chasing them, entering the cave was obviously not a wise move, but Jiruo had already rushed in, so they had no choice. Keep up. Liang Shixian gritted his teeth. The few of them followed closely behind and rushed into the cave. The cave was filled with spider webs of various sizes. The familiar feeling was the same as the one Jiruo had stirred with the wooden stick. In the dark, countless red eyes were staring at them. The few of them instantly felt their hearts turn cold. Liang Shixian thought in despair, "It's over." Jiruo, who was at the front, had already raised his red palm and smacked on the biggest spider web in the cave. "Have a taste of my iron sand palm." Whoosh! The high temperature of iron sand palm instantly ignited the cobweb, which was originally a flammable material. The fire spread extremely quickly, and the entire cave turned into a sea of fire in an instant. "Stay behind me!" Jiruo shouted. At the same time, he took out his sword and knife from his back. The hilt of the sword and hilt of the knife faced each other, and he aimed at the cave and rotated them at high speed. "Have a taste of this." The airflow did not affect the fire at all. After all, Jiruo was only a level 6 martial apprentice who was close to level 7. How fast could he turn? In fact, the youngster wanted to trigger the achievement, but he didn't. However, those nine-eyed magic spiders didn't get any closer. Instead, they kept retreating. Jiruo, who had inherited the attributes of the original top student, knew very well that the nine-eyed magic spider was afraid of fire. The spider web was denser the deeper one went into the cave, so the fire was burning towards the inside. Jiruo said that he would stay behind him, but in fact, it didn't matter if he stayed or not. At this moment, there were more than a dozen nine-eyed magic spiders behind them. In front of them was a raging flame, and behind the flame was a large group of nine-eyed magic spiders of unknown numbers. At first glance, it was already an absolute dead end. Even though the nine-eyed magic spider behind him did not dare to come close because of the flames, it did not leave either. They kept a certain distance from Jiruo and the others. As the fire spread deeper into the cave, Jiruo and the others followed the fire deeper and deeper, and the nine-eyed demon spiders inside retreated frantically. The other three had no choice but to follow Jiruo into the cave. The nine-eyed magic spider behind them had already entered the cave, completely blocking off their escape route. After the spider web was burned out, whether the nine-eyed magic spiders in front of them were all dead or not, Jiruo and the others would not be able to escape death. A level 9 martial apprentice nine-eyed magic spider, whether it was its body's strength or its own poison, was far from what a few level 6 martial apprentices could withstand. But Jiruo didn't panic at all. At least, he wasn't completely flustered. Because this direction had been corrected by absolute directional sense. After many inquiries, many corrections, and the average value, in theory, this cave was the way out. Thud. Suddenly, the sound of a heavy object falling to the ground was heard. It was mixed with the strange sound of the flames burning the spider silk and the terrified cries of the nine-eyed magic spiders. It was unusually abrupt. Jiruo's eyes were sharp, and he immediately saw a large cocoon in the middle of the burnt spider web. The sound of a heavy object falling to the ground came from the cocoon being burned, and the spider food inside it falling to the ground. It was a human. However, she was already unconscious. From her hair and figure, she was a woman. Jiruo stepped forward, grabbed the woman's collar, and turned her over. She had a pretty face, but her face was slightly purple. She had obviously been poisoned. There was an inspection pass on her chest. A martial arts examination inspector, he thought. Jiruo raised his hand and slapped the pretty female martial artist's face. Half of her face was swollen, and 2 of her teeth were knocked out. "Teacher! Wake up! Stop sleeping! Help us!" Tender and protective of the fairer sex? That was non-existent for now. If the invigilating martial artist doesn't wake up, everyone will die here today. Jiruo mused. Chapter 17. The martial artist must have been poisoned. Her body was so weak that Jiruo's full-strength slap could knock out her teeth. Fortunately, it gave good results. The martial artist slowly woke up, and her eyes were filled with confusion. Jiruo took a quick glance and got her name, Li Nanan, from her inspection pass. He frowned slightly. His instinct was telling him that something must have gone wrong in the martial arts examination. An invigilating martial artist was hidden by a nine-eyed magic spider in the cave as food storage. However, Jiruo did not know what was wrong. Besides, now was not the time to think about that. "Teacher, we are the examines for this martial arts examination. This is the nine-eyed magic spider's nest. Also, the 2 of them here have activated their rescue device," Jiruo quickly explained the situation. Although Li Nanan had been poisoned, she was still a pulsing realm martial artist. She quickly recalled the whole incident after regaining consciousness. She grabbed Jiruo's arm and said, "Get out of here. This group of nine-eyed demons has evolved into King Licher. Their strength is comparable to the divine stage of the pulsing realm." Before she finished, Li Nanan was stunned. Due to her teeth being knocked out and the paralyzing poison left by the nine-eyed magic spider, Li Nanan's speech was affected. She was unable to speak properly. Moreover, she saw that the cobwebs in the cave were on fire. The raging flames continued to spread into the depths of the cave, and ashes slowly drifted away from the burned areas. There were not many flammable objects in the nest, so the flames spread quickly. With the strong eyesight of a pulsing realm martial artist, Li Nanan could see the spider queen that had defeated her earlier in the depths of the cave roaring behind the flames. It was extremely angry. Jiruo nodded seriously. I know, teacher. We're just waiting for you to kill our way out of here. The other three had not recovered from the shock of Jiruo's slap. Kill our way out. Li Nanan was stunned. She was injured and poisoned. Although it was not fatal, she was no match for the large group of nine-eyed magic spiders. Soon, she saw the dozen of nine-eyed magic spiders that were chasing after Jiruo and the others. From their size, they were only at the level of a level 9 martial apprentice. They could be killed. All right. Follow me. Li Nanan stood up, shook her head, and dashed past Jiruo and the others toward the nine-eyed magic spiders. In the process, she also took out the traditional knife on Jiruo's back. Jiruo and the others could only see the gleam of the traditional knife. The faint golden red chi vitality mixed with the silver gleam of the traditional knife danced in the cave and slaughtered all the nine-eyed magic spiders that were blocking their way in the blink of an eye. The pulsing realm was a true martial artist, and all aspects of their body had long surpassed the limits of the human body. Li Nanan's short battle process was magnificent. The only demerit was that she did not say the name of her move when she attacked. Let's go. Li Nanan's vitality was surging, and the poison in her body was circulating with it. Her body was shaking, and she could not help but spurt out a mouthful of faint purple foul-smelling poisoned blood. Yet, she still remembered to turn back and tell the students to escape as soon as possible. However, she did not know that these 4 candidates had been on the run for the past 2 days. They had already gained a lot of experience. When Li Nanan rushed out, Jiruo and the others subconsciously followed her. Li Nanan turned around and saw Jiruo running past her. Thank you, teacher. Jiruo shouted politely. The 3 people behind him followed suit. Thank you, teacher. Li Nanan was speechless. Jiruo and the others had only learned the basic movement techniques, so their speed was as slow as a turtle crawling compared to a martial artist in the pulsing realm. However, Li Nanan could not keep up with them. She sensed her physical condition and heard the hissing of the large group of nine-eyed magic spiders behind her. She laughed bitterly in her heart and suppressed her dizziness as she shouted, "Don't look back. Their unknown change in the secret realm of Myriad Beast Mountain. Be careful, and don't worry about me." Although she had been forcibly awakened, it was already her limit to be able to stimulate her vitality to kill a dozen or so nine-eyed magic spiders blocking their way. Now that she was opening a path for the students, her mind relaxed slightly, and a strong feeling of dizziness came over her. She could not run away, so she could help the students escape as much as possible. It was really a pity that Li Nanan could not fulfill her responsibility as a martial artist who was on the exam inspection. Jiruo, who was running in the front, stopped and ran back without thinking. He picked up Li Nanan, who was trying to cover them with her last bit of consciousness. Why do all of you like covering at the back so much? Li Nanan's reaction was slow due to the poison. She was stunned for a moment when she suddenly looked back and said in a hurry, "What are you doing back here? You're still young. It's my responsibility as a martial artist invigilating the exam to protect you. I can die, but you can't. Take me with you, and none of us will be able to escape. Don't worry about me. Teacher, my knife is still in your hand." "I came back for it," Jiruo responded in a deep voice. The other 3 had gotten used to running. Zhangquan and Lu Nen knew that they were useless, so they ran without the slightest delay. They knew that even if they stayed, they would only be a burden to Jiruo and the others. Liang Shixian slowed down a little. He looked back as he ran. Seeing Jiruo carrying Li Nanan out, he heaved a sigh of relief and quickened his pace. "Jiruo, where should we go now?" Liang Shixian asked in a loud voice. The whistling wind in their ears and the heavy breathing from the strenuous exercise made them speak loudly. Jiruo thought for a moment and suddenly turned to run to the left side of the forest. "This way." "But it's a swamp over there," and there's Liang Shixian was stunned. In fact, there were more than 29-eyed magic spiders that were chasing them at the beginning. When they were escaping, they passed by the edge of the swamp, and several thick tentacles extended from it, catching a portion of the nine-eyed magic spiders. It was also because of this that Jiruo and the others knew that it was a swamp. Fortunately, Jiruo had been using absolute directional sense to find the safe direction, so their escape route was not fixed. Otherwise, they would have been dead. "Listen to me." Jiruo took the lead and ran toward the swamp. Li Nanan, who was on his shoulder, was not very clear-headed, so Jiruo did not care about Li Nanan's feelings when he ran. Under the violent jolts, the poisoned pulsing realm martial artist vomited. The stinky, poisonous vomit was sticky and unpleasant. However, Jiruo did not care. He would get dirty later anyway. 2 minutes later, Jiruo's body felt heavy. The air seemed to have turned into a viscous liquid, and the resistance was so great that Jiruo's speed plummeted. Slowing demon eye. Liang Shixian was shocked. They were also affected. A nine-eyed magic spider had caught up. Jiruo looked back subconsciously. There was no spider swarm behind him, at least not within 10 meters. In other words, it was not an ordinary nine-eyed magic spider, but the spider queen that Li Nanan had mentioned. The sudden heaviness made Lu Neng stagger and fall to the ground. Then, his strong desire to live made him ignore the pain and get up in a hurry. However, his running speed became slower and slower, and his physical energy consumption became more intense. We won't be able to run away. We can't run from this, he couldn't help but cry. Shut up. Keep running. Jiruo shouted. The swamp was already in sight. The swamp was not big, and the surface of the water was shallow. The surrounding vegetation looked strange, like the setting of a horror film. Not only that, but there were also some skeletons of unknown creatures scattered around the swamp. The mud on the skeletons had long dried up, and fine cracks appeared on it. Jiruo gritted his teeth and ran to the edge of the swamp with Li Nanan on his back. Then, he suddenly pounced and rolled in the mud with her. The mud in the middle of the swamp suddenly swelled up, as if something was trying to come out of the mud, but it was not very fast. Come and roll over here. Jiruo growled. The few people were speechless. They did not understand why Jiruo wanted them to do this, but they could already hear angry roars coming from behind them. In their panic, they could not care much and slid to the edge of the swamp, rolling in the mud. In the blink of an eye, the few of them had turned into mud. Don't move, and don't talk. Hold your breath. Have you played hide and seek? What f***ing hide and seek, the rest thought. Jiruo lay on his back in the mud and cast disguise on everyone. Then, he forced himself to stop breathing and waited quietly, feeling dizzy from the lack of oxygen. This skill could be used on other people, and it could increase the effect of disguise by 40%. Jiruo didn't know if he could fool the Spider Queen, but this was his last resort. They did not dare to move or even breathe. They stopped after the intense exercise, and everyone could hear their hearts beating. Li Nanan's breathing was weak. She had lost her mind and fallen into a coma. At this moment, the monster in the swamp finally emerged. It still had thick tentacles, but compared to before, these tentacles were all suffused with a very faint purple color. It stretched out of the swamp and shook its head slightly, as if it was drunk. It was obvious that it was poisoned by the nine-eyed demon spiders it captured before. However, the toxicity was not deep, so the impact was not great. Everyone's eyes were wide open, and they did not dare to move, afraid that they would be discovered by the tentacles and pulled into the swamp. However, those thick tentacles seemed to not have noticed them. They swayed slightly and looked a little confused. Hiss. At this moment, the angry Spider Queen arrived. Next, it all depended on whether the disguise skill was effective or not, and whether he could successfully divert the disaster. Chapter 18. The Spider Queen's body was huge. Just the length of its head to its rear cord was nearly 3 meters. Its 8 sharp legs were even more terrifying, leaving deep holes in the ground and rocks along the way. As the Spider Queen's spiky legs intersected, the huge Spider Queen seemed to be floating in the wind, not the least bit heavy. The surface of its body had a large number of burnt mottled traces, and its intense anger had even made the 9 blood-red eyes on its head somewhat distorted. Its ferocious mouth kept opening and closing, and only God knew how many nine-eyed magic spiders Jiruo had burned to death with a single fire. These magic creatures were afraid of fire for a reason. They had very weak resistance to fire. Because their spider silk was extremely flammable, once the spider silk came into contact with a little fire, it would not stop burning and would continue to burn. Moreover, unlike demonic beasts, after devils reaching a certain level, all aspects of their body's quality and resistance would be strengthened. Their advancement would indeed increase some of their corresponding resistance, but the increase would not be much. The devils would still be afraid of fire, and be unable to stand the heat like before. Looking at the Spider Queen's sorry state, it was clear that she had forced her way out of the sea of fire. For this fire-fearing devil to chase after Jiruo's group even though it had to cross the sea of fire, it was obvious that its offspring had suffered heavy losses, to the extent that it had lost its mind. The spider webs in the cave were extremely dense, and the fire was abnormally fierce. The low-level nine-eyed magic spider had probably already died in the sea of fire, and there was no need to mention the spider eggs. There definitely would not be many left behind. Jiruo lay in the mud and analyzed. The Spider Queen had already reached the edge of the swamp and was standing beside Jiruo. However, it did not find Jiruo and the others. They were hidden too well, as if they had completely blended in with the environment. Of course, this was not the only reason. In the middle of the swamp, the tentacles that looked a little lost were still shaking, as if they were wondering where the fluctuations they had just sensed were. Perhaps because of the demonic spider's poison, the devil's reaction was a little slow. The angry Spider Queen did not notice Jiruo and the others, but she sensed the aura of her descendants on the tentacles. Looking at the extremely faint purple on the tentacles, how could it not know that some of its descendants had already become food on the other party's plate? If it was any other time, the Spider Queen might not have done anything. However, at this moment, her descendants had suffered heavy losses, and she was burning with anger. After losing track of Jiruo and the others, and sensing the aura of her descendants on the tentacles, her intense anger suddenly had an outlet to vent. It neighed in anger, and Jiruo, who was lying beside it, almost covered his ears with his hands. Fortunately, Jiruo held back. The Spider Queen leaped high into the air and spun her body in mid-air. A deep purple web-like substance spurted out from her back. In the blink of an eye, a huge spider web had been laid out over the entire swamp. Lying in the mud, Jiruo's eyes were wide open as he exclaimed in his heart, "I can't tell if it's a male or female." The next moment, the tough spider silk dropped down and accurately stuck to the tentacles that were sticking out of the swamp. Then, as the Spider Queen hissed, the thick dark purple spider silk shrank and dragged out a fat catfish from the swamp. Those thick tentacles were the tentacles of this fat catfish. When it was dragged out, the fat catfish's eyes were still a little dazed. It seemed like it had intentionally poisoned itself. Perhaps to it, the nine-eyed magic spider's poison was like intoxicating wine. The Spider Queen, who was already on top of the fat catfish, did not care about anything else. With a hiss, the spider web wrapped around the fat catfish and bound it in the air. Then, it opened its ferocious mouth and bit the fat catfish. The fat catfish looked at the Spider Queen with its slightly blurred eyes, as if it still did not understand the situation. Perhaps it was because it was too fat, but the thick fat prevented the fat catfish from feeling much pain. The Spider Queen's 9 scarlet eyes flashed with an ominous glint. It injected its poison. Chi! 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 A sound similar to the opening of a bottle of cola rang out. The highly corrosive poison instantly melted a big hole in the fat catfish's body. The pain finally woke the fat catfish up. It roared and began to fight back. And so, the two powerful devils began to fight on the spider web. The fat catfish was forced into the air and left its home ground, but it was not at a disadvantage. It seemed to be stronger than the Spider Queen. Liang Shixian had already closed his eyes and waited for death. However, he did not feel the excruciating pain that he had imagined after a long time. He only heard angry hissing and whimpering. Puzzled, he opened his eyes and saw two devils fighting above him. Liang Shixian was dumbfounded. He did not dare to move, and he wasn't sure if his companions were still alive. He tried to speak in a low voice. "SHH. You can't speak when you're hiding," Jiruo said in a low voice. Liang Shixian heaved a sigh of relief, but at the same time, he felt that it was extremely absurd. They actually managed to dodge the two demons' attacks. He could not figure out the reason for this, and could only attribute it to their good luck. From Jiruo's voice, Liang Shixian knew that Jiruo was lying next to him. He looked at the two powerful magical beasts fighting above him and turned his head to see if Jiruo was okay. Then, Liang Shixian was stunned. Although Jiruo was lying in the mud like him, he had put his hands behind his head and crossed his legs. He was so comfortable. These demons have a bad neighborhood relationship. Jiruo smacked his lips and sighed. Liang Shixian was left speechless and mused. Does he really think he's here for an outing? There was no such thing as stopping in a battle between devils. Once a conflict occurred, it was bound to be a situation where one side would not rest until the other side was dead. The higher-level devils might have higher intelligence and knew how to stop losses in time. However, the Spider Queen was already furious, and the fat catfish was suddenly attacked. Both sides were in a bad mood. In addition, injuries were inevitable in the battle. Under the intense pain, both sides were in a rage, so how could they care about reducing losses? Both sides were intoxicated. But if Jiruo had to say it, the fat catfish would probably feel more aggrieved. After all, it did not know anything and was suddenly hung up by the Spider Queen to be attacked. Even if it had eaten a few nine-eyed magic spiders, it shouldn't have ended up like this. Usually, it would eat its neighbor's offspring a lot, using the poison of a low-level nine-eyed magic spider as a nerve-numbing wine. The Spider Queen didn't seem to be angry. Although the fat catfish's eyes were also red, it also felt a little aggrieved. Therefore, it would not and could not stop attacking. A fight had broken out at its home. Although it was at fault in the first place, the Spider Queen shouldn't be so angry, should it? It would be fine if it won, but if it lost, it would be too embarrassing. Liang Shixian said softly, "Jiruo, we are not out of danger yet. Can you stop analyzing the minds of the two devils?" In fact, the fat catfish's mental activities were all imagined and described by Jiruo. Jiruo replied unhappily, "What else can we do? Shall we just lie here? Also, Don't you know that for such a match between experts that is open to the audience, there will usually be a dedicated live commentator to help the audience analyze the situation? He mused. What kind of expert battle was open to the audience? What F***ing live commentary? Zhang Quan and Lu Neng listened to the conversation between the two people beside them, not even daring to breathe loudly. The two of them were not very brave, and they did not dare to speak at this time. They were afraid that the two devils that Jiruo had analyzed would notice them. Chapter 19. Disguise's remark was very interesting. This was the first time that Jiruo had obtained a skill with two remarks. Although the content of the remark was a little strange, after thinking about it carefully, the second remark was a little similar to the first remark. Understanding the environment, blending in with the environment, and becoming the environment. This was what Jiruo and the others were doing right now. They were covered in mud and were still lying motionless in the mud. Even if they did not have any skill effects, it would be difficult to notice their existence at first glance. After all, although they were only at the edge of the swamp, the mud was still 4 to 5 centimeters deep. They had rolled a few rounds in the mud and were covered in mud. If one did not look carefully, one would not be able to tell. They blended into the environment and became the environment, so the devils could no longer see them. Of course, part of the reason was that the Spider Queen had lost her mind. In short, as long as Jiruo and the others did not do anything out of line, they would be able to see the end of this show. If he was lucky, he could probably get 2 out-of-class questions. Li Nanan's aura fluctuated. After all, she was a martial artist in the pulsing realm. The poison did not seem to be from the Spider Queen, or the Spider Queen did not want to kill her directly. Although the poison could be fatal, Li Nanan was a martial artist in the pulsing realm. She had opened up the meridians in her body and had perfect control over her body. It was easy for her to move her vitality, or use her muscles to seal up some small wounds. However, the poison also had a strong numbing effect. Otherwise, she would have expelled the poison out of her body through the circulation of her vitality. Previously, when she was trapped in the spider silk cocoon, the 9-eyed magic spiders would inject poison into her every once in a while. As a result, Li Nanan's strong physical fitness as a pulsing realm martial artist did not have the corresponding effect. Now that she had been saved by Jiruo, although she was still not fully conscious, the residual poison in her body was being diluted by the circulation of her vitality. If it was not for the Spider Queen personally poisoning not, the poison of an ordinary 9-eyed magic spider would not be able to kill her unless the dosage was especially large. Powerful martial artists were immune to all poisons. How are the students? Did they manage to escape? She thought. Although her body was still numb and weak, Li Nanan was gradually waking up. She could feel that she was lying down somewhere, motionless. Recalling the scene when Jiruo turned around and ran with her, Li Nanan, who was not fully awake yet, felt a little bitter. They probably thought I was a burden and left me in the wild. This is good too. The exam patrollers are supposed to protect the exam candidates. How can they drag the students down? Although she thought this way, she felt a little disappointed. After all, who didn't want to live? She was still young. They're just martial apprentices. They won't be able to run far if they bring me along. Everyone will die. If they abandoned me, my corpse can still attract the attention of some 9-eyed magic spiders. Someone had to be sacrificed, and not everyone will die. I didn't fulfill my responsibility as the exam invigilator, and I can't drag the students down, Li Nanan comforted herself in her heart. However, she still couldn't help but feel sad and afraid of death. She sobbed softly, as if she was crying in a low voice. Li Nanan gradually got used to the strong tinnitus and dizziness. Although she was still very weak, she could already hear some things. Wow! This catfish wagging its tail is truly amazing. Earlier, the fat catfish had been using its head and whiskers to attack. It looked clumsy, but it was actually using psychological tactics to numb the spider. When the spider revealed a flaw due to its carelessness, the fat catfish's tail whipped the spider's mouth, causing it to tilt. Good luck. Catfish brother. You're the fattest. Jiruo was explaining in a low voice, but Liang Shixian and the other two did not care about him anymore. The two devils above their heads were already killing each other, so they could not expose themselves for a while. The big spider was not to be outdone either. Although it was caught off guard and its mouth was slanted, it did not care at all. It treated it as if it had bought a limited edition skin for a game. Teacher, you're awake? Why are you crying? Are you hungry? Just bear with it a little longer, we'll be able to go eat soon. Jiruo, who was in high spirits, suddenly heard a low cry beside him, turned around, and asked. Li Nanan, who was crying, was stunned. The sadness that she had been brewing suddenly became incoherent. She was lying right next to Jiruo. When she was unconscious, Jiruo had helped her roll in the mud, so her head was tilted to Jiruo's side. Li Nanan opened her eyes in a hurry. You didn't manage to escape? I told you not to worry about me. Why didn't you listen? SHH. Jiruo looked at Li Nanan seriously. Teacher, you can't be too loud when you're hiding or watching a show. It'll affect other people's experience. Hide and seek. Watch a show. Li Nanan turned her head stiffly and looked up. Two devils that were obviously much stronger than her were fighting on a huge dark purple spider web. Both sides were covered in wounds. The six-tentacled catfish was covered in tiny holes, which were caused by the spider queen's ferocious mouth and sharp legs. Some places were even corroded by the highly corrosive poison, leaving large potholes that were still emitting green smoke. Many of the wounds were bleeding, and the blood was a strange black-purple color, emitting a strong fishy smell. It was obvious that the poison was not shallow. The spider queen that had defeated and captured Li Nanan was not in a better state. Half of its ferocious mouthpart had disappeared without a trace. No one knew where it had gone. The spider's sac behind it was slightly shriveled, and 3 of its 8 sharp legs were broken. Li Nanan felt that it was extremely absurd. They were lying under the 2 devils, but the 2 devils did not attack them. They were fighting to the death, and it seemed that they had been fighting for a long time. Now what's the situation? Li Nanan asked in a daze. I don't know either. Jiruoxi smacked his lips. They just started fighting for no reason. However, this situation was not difficult to analyze. It was nothing more than love at first sight. It's one-sided love. Unobtainable love, hate born from love, and so on. Maybe the six-tentacled catfish cheated on her, so the spider queen was so angry that she came to beat him up. Li Nanan was confused and thought, love at first sight? Hate born from love? What the hell is this? The 2 of them were not of the same race. Teacher, how's your body? I saw that you were quite seriously poisoned before, how do you feel now? Jiruo asked. Li Nanan thought for a while and said in a low voice, the poison has almost been diluted by my vitality, but I still need some time to recover. I see. Then, teacher, you should lie down and rest. We're not in a hurry. We'll wait for you to slowly recover. Li Nanan opened her mouth, but she did not know what to say. How could the student say it so easily? This was Myriad Beast Mountain's secret realm that had undergone a huge change. Even her, a martial arts invigilator, had almost died. Why did the student not seem to be worried at all? Suddenly, Li Nanan felt something strange in her mouth. She touched the strange place with her tongue subconsciously. Why did my teeth fall out? She was stunned. Then, she felt that her face seemed to be a little swollen, but the poison in her body had not disappeared, so she did not feel much pain. At this moment, Jiruo suddenly said, this spider is too much. She went behind 6 tentacled catfish's back and fooled around outside, giving birth to a bunch of small spiders. It has the nerve to come here and blame the 6 tentacled catfish for cheating. This is too much. There was a deep doubt in her heart. Li Nanan was speechless and mused inwardly, why did I lose 2 of my teeth? I've never heard of the 9-eyed magic spider's poison causing teeth to fall off. Chapter 20. Hiss. Hiss. The spider queen gasped for breath with difficulty. 2 of its remaining 5 spiky legs had been broken. At this moment, it had 2 legs on each side of her body, and 1 on each side. Not only that, but more than half of the 9 scarlet eyes on its head had been blinded. There was no taboo in the battle between devils. They fought according to their instincts, and each move was fatal. Although the spider queen was in a miserable state, the 6-tentacled catfish was not any better. It had been affected by the spider queen's demonic eye of slowness and had been injected with a large amount of venom. At this moment, it was covered in injuries and could no longer move. It was tied up by the spider queen's tough spider silk and was bound to the spider web. The victory was decided. The spider queen had won by a narrow margin. They're done fighting now. Jiruo smacked his lips. What a fierce fight. Liang Shixian reminded him in a low voice, Jiruo. Don't talk anymore. If it finds us, we'll be in trouble. The spider queen had lost more than half of its legs, and it was barely able to stabilize herself on the spider web. But fortunately, it won, and all of this was not a problem. The advancement of devils was quite special. Devouring powerful demons, demonic beasts, or martial artists could greatly increase their strength, and the injuries they suffered in battle would also recover at a very terrifying speed. Therefore, as long as it was alive, it did not matter how serious its injuries were. It was fine as long as it won. Of course, the evolutionary path of devils was not fixed. After devouring some powerful existences, it might even change their species. Jiruo could almost foresee that after the spider queen devoured and digested the 6-tentacled catfish, its life form would definitely change. At that time, it might no longer be a 9-eyed magic spider. After the spider queen panted for a while, the remaining magic eye on her head suddenly glowed red. Jiruo and the others lay on the ground, watching the spider web that had been used as the battlefield between the two sides suddenly shrink and bind the six-tentacled catfish even tighter. At the same time, the spider silk wrapped around the spider queen's body, turning into spikes and sealing its wounds. It was actually using the spider silk to repair its broken body. Of course, the spider web limbs did not have the strength of their original bodies, but they were enough to be used as artificial limbs. It did not intend to devour the six-tentacled catfish here because the monster was very weak when it was advancing. It would be dangerous to advance here. Therefore, no matter how tempting the six-tentacled catfish was, it had to endure it. The spider queen could only devour it after returning to the cave and laying down the spider web again. The reason why devils were called devils was that they had a few special abilities in addition to their strange way of advancement. For example, the nine-eyed magic spider had the special ability of the slowing magic eye, which could reduce the speed of its prey. Not only that, but as spider-type devils, they also had several general abilities of spider devils. For example, poison making, and spider silk manipulation. Bang! The spider queen fell down with the dying six-tentacled catfish on her back, no longer as agile as before. It slowly walked towards its own cave. Liang Shixian and the rest did not dare to breathe too loudly. The situation was different from before. If they spoke rashly now, they would be discovered. Jiruo thought for a while and suddenly got up from the mud. Jiruo, what are you doing? Liang Shixian was shocked. The spider queen was too heavily injured to notice them. Letting the spider queen leave seemed to be the best choice. But Jiruo thought for a while and pointed at the spider queen, who was moving slowly and said, "It's so heavily injured. I'm worried about it going back alone." "Why do you care?" Liang Shixian was going crazy. "Lie down. Don't let it find you." "No. We can't just leave her in the lurch," Jiruo said seriously. The few of them was rendered speechless. Even Li Nanan, whose body was still a little numb, was dumbfounded. She thought, "Do you even know what you're saying? That is a monster. Watch it die and not save it?" Was this the time to consider this? However, before they could persuade him, Jiruo got up and rushed out. Fellow townsmen, don't go. You're so seriously injured. It's not safe for you to go back by yourself." Covered in mud, the teenager whose face was so hard to recognize from the mud waved his arms and chased after the spider queen. His words of concern seemed to be really thinking about the spider queen. Of course, if the mud on the young man's palm did not quickly dry up and crack, revealing the red palm inside, it would be more believable. The heavily injured spider queen was slightly stunned when she heard the sound. She was so severely injured that her reaction was a little slow. By the time it realized something was wrong, Jiruo was already behind the spider queen. Before the spider queen could turn around, Jiruo jumped up and landed on her back. A pair of red and hot palms slapped the spider queen's dark purple spider silk. His movements seemed gentle, as if he was patting the shoulder of a friend who was about to part. "Fellow townsmen, why don't you stay here first? You're so seriously injured, so don't rush back." As Jiruo consoled her, the extremely warm iron sand palm rubbed against the dark purple spider silk at a high speed. This fellow was indeed a monster at the divine stage of the pulsing realm. Even the spider silk had a higher heat resistance than ordinary nine-eyed demon spiders. However, it was useless. Jiruo's iron sand palm had already reached the exemplary mastery level. In theory, it was also a level that could only be reached by a martial artist in the pulsing realm. The temperature was extremely high, and at this moment, the friction was so high that the dark purple spider silk was ignited in the blink of an eye. First, it was a spark, then it quickly spread. Jiruo had already jumped away. He was as agile as a monkey, and he quickly climbed up a tree. The spider silk was easily flammable, and it was difficult to put out once it was set on fire. The spider queen's body was covered in a large amount of spider silk. It was originally used to control her injuries and to move, but now it had become a curse. In the raging fire, the spider queen roared and rolled on the ground, trying to put out the fire. However, once the nine-eyed magic spider silk was ignited, it would be very difficult to extinguish it even with water. How could it be extinguished so easily? The heavily injured spider queen was burned by the fire, and her injuries worsened. The dying six-tentacle catfish was also burned by the flames. However, it no longer had the strength to struggle. Jiruo squatted on the tree and looked at the spider queen who was rolling on the ground in pain. He could not help but exclaim, "If you don't want to stay, you should have said so earlier. Such a big spider, why is it still rolling around and making a scene?" The dark purple spider silk was highly toxic. Now that the spider silk was ignited by the flames, purple poisonous smoke slowly rose. The secret realm of the myriad beast mountain, without the sun, also had the distinction of day and night. It was daytime, and the sunlight shone down from the sky, passing through the treetops and forming spots of light on the grass in the forest. It also shone on the spider queen, who was howling in pain. Jiruo wondered, is this the legendary purple smoke produced by the incense burner under sunlight? So you're called the incense burner. When the purple poisonous smoke rose, he had already left the treetop. He helped Li Nanan up, who was still a little numb, and called everyone to head upstream. Chapter 21. It's a pity that such a good score was wasted, Jiruo said with regret somewhere in the mountain. The Spider Queen's poison was so strong that it could even corrode rocks. As the spider silk burned, poisonous smoke rose into the air. Regardless of whether the Spider Queen died or not, the surrounding forest would be infected with the poison. Jiruo was not in the pulsing realm, and he did not have that much resistance against poison. He could not go back and take the free points. Liang Shixian could not help but ask, Jiruo, can you not be so impulsive in the future? Do you know how dangerous it was just now? If your iron sand palm can't ignite the spider silk, then you'll be courting death if you go back. Even though the Spider Queen is heavily injured, it's still not something you can fight against. Jiruo grinned and responded, isn't it fine? Don't worry. Everything is under control. Was the young man impulsive at that time? Certainly, he was not. Even though Liang Shixian was good at his studies, he was just an ordinary high school student. All he wanted to do was to lie in the mud and wait for the Spider Queen to leave with her prey. Then, they would be safe. Jiruo had lived 2 lives, so he had a deeper understanding of the situation than Liang Shixian. Although there would be a period of weakness when a devil advanced, the time for low-level devils to advance was not long. There were still 5 days before the martial arts examination would end, so Jiruo and the others would have to stay in Myriad Beast Mountain for another 5 days. This period of time was enough for the Spider Queen to devour the 6 tentacle catfish and complete her advancement. At that time, if the evolved Spider Queen wanted to hunt them down, they would have to face a spider-like monster at its peak that had surpassed the pulsing realm. However, this was only a possibility. If that really happened, they were not sure if the Spider Queen would be able to find them. But as long as it was possible, Jiruo did not want to gamble. Caution was the parent of safety. In Myriad Beast Mountain, one could never be too cautious. That's right, teacher. You said earlier that there was an unknown change in the secret realm of Myriad Beast Mountain. What did you mean? Jiruo suddenly asked. He had long noticed that something was wrong. Along the way, everything they had encountered in the secret realm of Myriad Beast Mountain was different from what they had learned in school. At the very least, the teachers in the school had never said that goblins could speak the human language and could grow blood-red rice. In fact, even the patrolling martial artists had almost become food for the demons. Li Nanan pondered for a moment. I'm not sure. The designated area suddenly became chaotic. The internet connection was cut off, and some demonic beasts and devils that obviously exceeded the standards of the martial arts examination appeared in the area under my jurisdiction. The designated area for the marital arts exam is in chaos. Then, where are we now? Jiruo asked. In the secret realm of Myriad Beast Mountain, the area controlled by humans was only at the foot of the mountain. It was divided into a total of 60 regions, and the further the region was numbered, the more dangerous it was. This was the knowledge in high school textbooks, and it was no secret. I don't know. Li Nanan shook her head. My watch was damaged when I fought the Spider Queen. I can't check the map. I don't know where we are now. Jiruo frowned. It was too dangerous for him to be in an area that was not specified in the martial test. Although absolute directional sense could avoid danger to a certain extent, this ability was not omnipotent. The correction ratio was too low, and the slightest mistake would lead to death. The other 3 also knew what leaving the combat examination's designated area meant, and their faces were filled with worry. Seeing this, Li Nanan realized that she had said something wrong. Although it was the truth, sometimes, the truth could not be told. Don't worry. She consoled, as a teacher, I will protect you all. There was an accident during the martial arts examination. We can't follow the previous rules anymore. The most important thing now is to survive. Hearing her words, Lu Neng could not help but say, Teacher, but you were caught by the 9-eyed magic spider before. It was Jiruo who saved you. How are you going to protect? Shut up. Don't you know how to speak? Jiruo scolded. The teacher said that she would protect us, so she will definitely protect us. What nonsense are you spouting? Liang Shixian was also looking at Lu Neng with an unfriendly expression, and he mused inwardly, this fellow doesn't really know how to speak. Lu Neng opened his mouth, but he did not refute anything. He sat back down next to Zhang Quan. Li Nanan looked embarrassed. She turned to Jiruo. Student, you are Jiruo, right? He is right. It's all thanks to you this time, I was planning to. Gur. Gur. Before she could finish her words, Li Nanan's stomach suddenly growled. She blushed. Fortunately, her face was still covered in a thick layer of mud, so it was not obvious. During the martial examination, the martial artists who were on patrol had to enter the examination hall one day in advance. Not only did they have to familiarize themselves with the exam area, but they also had to check if there were any demonic beasts or devils that exceeded the limits of what the exam candidates could bear. On the first day of Li Nanan's arrival, everything was normal. However, after she had familiarized herself with the area she was in charge of, she was attacked by the nine-eyed magic spider. The nine-eyed magic spiders had always lived in groups, and with the Spider Queen, who was equivalent to a divine stage of a pulsing realm martial artist, held the line. The slowing demonic eyes could even affect a pulsing realm martial artist. After a round of fighting, Li Nanan was defeated. For the next few days, she had been trapped in the nine-eyed magic spider's nest and was constantly injected with venom by a large number of nine-eyed magic spiders. Li Nanan's body was numb and muddled until Jiruo rescued her. In total, she had not eaten for almost 3 days. She had also experienced an intense battle. After Li Nanan had escaped, she had been using her vitality to dilute the poison in her body. She had long been exhausted. Seeing this, Jiruo stood up and unzipped his school trousers pocket. He took out 2 handfuls of blood-red rice that were covered in mud. Most of the blood-red rice had been lost during the escape, and only a little was left in the pocket. "It's almost time, let's eat, teacher, you eat first." Jiruo handed the blood-red rice to Li Nanan and said, "The conditions are limited. I hope the teacher won't mind." This time, Jiruo did not use iron sand palm to stir-fry the rice. His pockets were only this big, the amount of blood-red rice would not be enough to cover his palms even if he filled them up. The special effect of fried rice wouldn't be triggered. "This is blood-red rice." Li Nanan was stunned for a moment. The blood-red rice had not even been deshelled. It must not have been brought from outside the examination field, but the students had gained fortuitous encounters in the examination field. "You guys eat first." "I'm not hungry." Instinctively, Li Nanan wanted to refuse. "Teacher, just eat. You're a martial artist who's on the exam patrol. You'll only have the strength to protect us after you're full, don't you?" Liang Shixian also chimed in, "That's right, teacher. It's much more useful for you to eat your fill than us. Don't worry and eat. If it's not enough, I have more." As he spoke, Liang Shixian unzipped his trousers pockets and took out blood rice. He did not expect the class president to have the same thought as him. He did not put all the blood-red rice in the simple bag made from the uniform jacket. There was still some left. Li Nanan hesitated for a moment and finally nodded. "All right then. I will eat first. I'll bring you guys to find other food later." "Wait." Jiruo suddenly said. Li Nanan was about to swallow it when Jiruo suddenly stopped her. She thought that Jiruo had changed his mind. Jiruo took the blood-red rice from Liang Shixian and Li Nanan, mixed them together, and put them on the ground. Then, he raised his hands and gestured something. "Teacher, it's hard to digest raw food," Jiruo said seriously. "It's okay," Li Nanan said. She saw Jiruo put his hands into the blood-red rice. His palms were red and he was stir-frying. "Wait a moment, teacher. I'll cook it for you before you eat." Li Nanan was dumbfounded and wondered, iron sand palm can be used like this. Chapter 22. As Li Nanan's face was full of disbelief, the blood-red rice was gradually cooked by Jiruo with iron sand palm. "Teacher, eat it while it's hot." Jiruo picked up the blood-red rice and handed it to Li Nanan. Although he was a little hungry and there was only this much blood-red rice left, Jiruo knew who should eat the blood-red rice to maximize the benefits. Allowing a pulsing realm martial artist to recover her strength was more important than anything else. Okay. "Thank you, student Jiruo," Li Nanan said in a low voice. Speaking of which, it was all thanks to Jiruo that she was able to escape this time. As a martial artist who patrolled the exam, she did not fulfill her responsibilities and did not protect the candidates in her exam area. Li Nanan did not even know where her exam area was. She felt ashamed. However, she continued to gobble down the blood-red rice that Jiruo had cooked with iron sand palm. At this moment, the poison in Li Nanan's body had not been detoxified. Although she was hungry, she did not have a strong appetite. In addition, the blood-red rice had not been husked and was still stained with mud, so the taste was really not that good. However, Li Nanan knew very well that she had to eat her fill and recover as soon as possible in order to protect these students. So, Li Nanan swallowed all the blood-red rice despite her nausea. A moment later, Li Nanan felt a warm current rising in her stomach. The familiar feeling of strength gradually returned. Her numb body was recovering quickly. She heaved a sigh of relief. When Li Nanan regained her strength, she would go out to hunt. "I can't always rely on the students to find food, can I? I'm the teacher," she mused. "Teacher, are you thirsty? Do you want me to get you some water?" Jiruo asked. Li Nanan shook her head slightly. The blood-red rice in her stomach was being refined quickly. The speed of her vitality circulation was gradually returning to normal. In a few hours, she would be able to regain her combat strength. Besides, Jiruo had given her all the blood-red rice they had left. How could Li Nanan have the face to ask others to take care of her? Thank you, student Jiruo, but there's no need. I'll be fine after a short rest. The poison in my body has almost been diluted. All right, then. Have a good rest, teacher. I'll walk around the area. Be careful, don't run too far. Hearing this, Jiruo suddenly experienced the feeling of parent asking their child to play on the side. Okay, teacher. Jiruo turned around and left the valley. He did not plan to go too far. In fact, he left to get new equipment. The small wooden stick that Jiruo had picked up before was broken, so he was going to find a new one. Liang Shixian glanced at Lu Neng and said to Li Nanan, Teacher, I'm going with Jiruo. Okay, the current Myriad Beast Mountain is not very peaceful. You should all be careful. Li Nanan had started to accelerate her recovery. All right, he said. However, before Liang Shixian could catch up to Jiruo, Jiruo's cry of surprise came from outside the mountain depression. Whoa! Liang Shixian's expression changed and he said anxiously, What's wrong, Jiruo? What happened? As he spoke, Liang Shixian prepared to rush out. Li Nanan also tensed up and was ready to attack. However, before she could do anything, Jiruo's excited voice came from outside the valley. What a straight wooden stick! I'm so lucky to have picked up another sword. Li Nanan was confused and thought, what stick, and what sword? As soon as Liang Shixian rushed out, he saw Jiruo holding a straight wooden stick in one hand and admiring it. If one did not know better, they would think that Jiruo was holding a rare treasure. Liang Shixian stumbled and almost fell. He could not help but say angrily, Jiruo. Can you not be so childish? How is this childish? Jiruo waved his two sticks happily. This stick is so straight. It's not easy to see. Hee hee. Look at my dual blade style. The young man brandished a small wooden stick, learning some of the dual blade style moves he had seen in his previous life, and struck at Liang Shixian. Of course, he did not use much power, he was just playing around. Liang Shixian slapped the wooden stick away and frowned. Stop it, Jiruo. I know you like to play, but can't you distinguish the occasion? Ah, class president. You've misunderstood me. I looked for a wooden stick for you, Jiruo said, feeling wronged. For me? Liang Shixian was stunned for a moment. Suddenly, he seemed to have thought of something and his expression changed. Jiruo. I won't fight with you using a wooden stick, so just give up on that idea. Ah, I didn't mean that. Class president, didn't you want to learn the broken arrow move? Jiruo took out a wooden stick and said. It just so happens that we're waiting for teacher to circulate her vitality to treat her injuries. There's nothing much for me to do, so I'll teach you properly. You're teaching me now. Liang Shixian was stunned. Although Jiruo had briefly explained the basic theory of the broken arrow move to Liang Shixian, martial arts could never be learned just by listening to the theory. He had to put it into practice. Of course. We're safe now and have the time, so why not? Jiruo smiled. It just so happens that a teacher is here too. If there's anything wrong with my teaching, I can ask the teacher to help correct it. Li Nanan nodded. You're right. We're safe for now. I can give you some advice on martial arts. In fact, if Jiruo had asked, she would have taught him some martial arts techniques. No matter their identities were, a life-saving grace was a life-saving grace. This Liang Shixian looked at the small wooden stick that Jiruo handed to him and subconsciously glanced at Zhongquan and Lu Neng, who were sitting behind Li Nanan. He was a little hesitant. It was not that he did not want to learn it, but this was a technique that Jiruo had created himself. If he were to teach it here, he was afraid that Zhongquan and Lu Neng would learn it. It was not that Liang Shixian was stingy, but Lu Neng's words from before made him dislike Lu Neng. It was common to dislike something with involvement with something you dislike. Subconsciously, he also disliked Zhongquan, who was from the same school as Lu Neng. Liang Shixian wanted to learn, but he did not want Zhongquan and Lu Neng to learn. He felt uncomfortable. However, Jiruo did not care at all. He stuffed the stick into Liang Shixian's hands and said, You're a man. Why are you so pretentious? You're taking so long. Of course, Jiruo knew what Liang Shixian was worried about. However, he did not care. Although he did dislike Lu Neng, it was not that Jiruo looked down on them. They had not even learned the basic knowledge taught in school, so what if he taught them in front of them? Will they be able to learn it? That's funny, he thought inwardly. Jiruo grinned and said, Class president, do you still remember what I told you before? Solitude 9 Sword's broken arrow form is a sword technique specially used to block flying objects. Liang Shixian's mouth twitched. Although he had already heard the words flying objects from Jiruo's mouth again, he still felt a little speechless. Can't he just say that hidden weapons? It's as if he is playing a game, he thought. Jiruo continued, this sword skill doesn't have any specific moves. The main focus is listening to the wind to determine position and prediction. Class President, you should have no problems with your listening. The main thing is to predict. He went on, during a battle, you need to make a quick judgment of the situation and determine the order of the flying objects through listening to the wind. At that time, your sword moves will produce a unique rhythm, or rather, a rhythm. At that time, you can be considered to have mastered the sword technique. Li Nanan could not help but frown as she listened. Chapter 23. Although they were not of equal status, Li Nanan was still grateful to Jiruo. That was why she had been listening to Jiruo's sword art theory while treating her poison. Li Nanan had made up her mind to teach Jiruo well. If Jiruo was willing, she would teach him everything she could. After all, he had saved her life. However, after listening to Jiruo's explanation, she suddenly felt that the student was overly ambitious. Was Jiruo's sword art theory not good? In fact, it was actually very good. However, was it not feasible? Theoretically, it was possible. However, it was too advanced for a martial apprentice. Even for a pulsing realm martial artist like her, it was slightly ahead of her time. It was common knowledge that no matter if one was a martial apprentice or in the pulsing realm, if one wanted to block a hidden weapon or a flying tool with a sword, one could only fight speed with speed. Using extremely fast sword techniques to form a simple sword defense in front of one's body to block it was simply based on luck. Judging a person's position by sound was a technique that almost all martial artists knew. However, predicting was not a skill that could be learned just by listening to sounds. Battles with demons or martial artists were ever-changing. It was almost impossible if one wanted to know the position of all the flying objects in an instant by listening to the sound, and predict the landing point of those flying objects through brain calculations at the same time while unleashing sword moves. Even a pulsing realm martial artist would rarely have such a strong reaction speed, let alone a martial apprentice. The sword technique that Jiruo described could only be called an illusionary sword technique. Li Nanan hesitated for a moment and said, Student Jiruo, martial arts should be down to earth. She could not say it too clearly, for fear of hurting Jiruo's self-esteem. However, Jiruo understood what Li Nanan was implying. She thought that he was overly ambitious. Therefore, Jiruo waved the stick in his hand and said, that's all for the theory. Teacher, can you do me a favor? What favor? Li Nanan was stunned. Jiruo turned around and picked up a pile of small stones from all over the hill. He placed them in front of Li Nanan and said, the knowledge gained from the book is always shallow, I must personally demonstrate it for this matter. Swordsmanship can't be learned just by listening to the theory. You still have to watch the actual combat practice. Teacher, please throw a stone at me. I'll demonstrate it to class president. You want me to throw stones? Li Nanan hesitated for a moment, then nodded. All right, she said. She was hesitating whether she should use more force or not. If Jiruo could not handle the heavy words, it might hurt his confidence. But if she said it lightly, Li Nanan felt that she was lying to these children, which would do no good to their martial arts path. She was a little conflicted. Teacher, I'm ready. Yes. Li Nanan took a deep breath and decided to hit him harder. If his confidence was hit, so be it. On the path of martial arts, there was no room for sneaky tricks. She wanted to use this opportunity to teach Jiruo the principle of one should not be overly ambitious in martial arts. Li Nanan picked up a stone, twisted her wrist, and threw it with the standard throwing technique of hidden weapons. Swish. 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 The stone was so fast that even Jiruo, a level 6 martial apprentice, could not see it clearly. Li Nanan thought to herself, if this stone had hit me, it would have been very painful, but the teaching effect would have been remarkable. She stared at Jiruo. With her pulsing realm, even if she had not fully recovered, she would not miss. Jiruo was only a level 6 martial apprentice, so this attack would definitely hit. But the next moment, she was stunned. Jiruo did not even look at the stone she had thrown. He even turned to talk to Liang Shixian. Class president, look carefully. By listening to the sound and predicting the position, its Solitude 9 sword's broken arrow form. At the same time, the sword that Jiruo had been carrying on his back was now in his hand. He didn't even look at it, he just waved it around casually, and it stopped at a certain spot. Swoosh. The stone was bounced off by the sword. Li Nanan was slightly stunned. Was it luck? Or did Jiruo really master that sword technique, she wondered. At this moment, Jiruo turned around and smiled. Teacher, don't stop throwing. Do throw more. We will be able to see the effect by throwing one at a time, won't we? Li Nanan took a deep breath and said, fine. She picked up 3 stones and threw them at the same time. The 3 stones flew through the air at a speed so fast that the naked eye could not see them clearly. They formed a triangle and flew toward Jiruo. The 3 stones were thrown at a tricky angle. According to Li Nanan's plan, even if Jiruo could block one of them, he would be hit by the other 2. It was impossible for a level 6 martial apprentice to block 3 stones at the same time. Even if Jiruo could react in time, he would not have the time to block the other 2 after blocking one. However, Jiruo suddenly moved his sword to the left without any reason. He swung his sword from the bottom to the top, forming a semicircle. Clang! 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 The sound rang out almost at the same time. Li Nanan's mouth was wide open. It was not that she could not do it, but Jiruo was only a level 6 martial apprentice. How could he predict the trajectory and order of the stones I threw just by listening to the sound, she mused. Jiruo turned around again and said to Liang Shixian, class president, as long as you master the sword technique, regardless of whether you can see or not, as long as you can hear. Li Nanan's eyes narrowed. She threw out 7 stones in a flash with a special technique. Some of the 7 stones were fast and some were slow, but the difference in speed was not big. They could be considered to be moving at the same time. Not only that, 3 of the stones were not flying in a straight line. Instead, 2 of them were flying in an arc, and 1 was flying in a curve. Jiruo was not even looking at the stones. Even if he could see clearly, he would not be able to predict the trajectory. The stones were knocked down one after another, but Jiruo did not even look back. At the same time, the last stone that Li Nanan threw was the one that flew in a curve. Jiruo still did not turn around. The stone was already in front of Jiruo. If he didn't block it, the stone would hit his chest. However, Jiruo did not seem to notice the stone. He did not block it with his sword. Instead, he raised his sword and placed it above his head. Liang Shixian did not understand what Jiruo's action, but Li Nanan was shocked. The stone did not land on Jiruo's body. Instead, it broke into dozens of tiny pieces above his head and fell down. Jiruo's sword moved again, and his movements were light and relaxed. Clang! 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 The sound of the crushed stones hitting the sword was blocked. Jiruo was still talking to Liang Shixian. After hearing the sound, you can predict the trajectory and counter it one by one. In fact, this sword technique doesn't require much powerful calculation ability. I'll tell you some tips on this sword technique later. As long as you master these techniques and practice diligently, you'll naturally master this special rhythm and movement. After that, it'll be very easy to use the sword technique in battle. You can just follow your instincts and attack. Ah, this Li Nanan was dumbfounded. Chapter 24. Li Nanan recalled the sword stance displayed by Jiruo when he fended off the last stone that changed direction and shattered. Suddenly, a strange feeling welled up in her heart. She suddenly mused, it was as if the stones had hit Jiruo's sword on their own. Jiruo's sword moves was light and swift, and the first to strike. It was precise and elegant. She felt that it was absurd and continued thinking, I'm a pulsing realm martial artist, and yet I'm rendered speechless by a college entrance examination student. Moreover, Jiruo's sword technique did not release any sword energy. He was just using his exquisite sword moves. In other words, Jiruo's sword technique was only at the beginner level. Zhang Quan and Lu Nang, who were behind her, also felt the same way. They also wanted to learn, but they felt too embarrassed. Li Nanan pursed her lips and suddenly asked, Student Jiruo, this sword art, where did you learn it from? Where did I learn it? Teacher, I created the sword technique myself. Jiruo chuckled. You self-created it? Li Nanan was shocked again. Teacher. Liang Shixian said hurriedly, this sword technique was indeed created by Jiruo himself. He's very talented. The class president was also thinking of Jiruo's circumstances. Jiruo was an orphan, so he did not have as many resources as a normal student. However, if Jiruo could be favored by the martial artist who was on the examination team, and even be taught some martial arts, it would be a good thing for him. If that were the case, not only would Liang Shixian not be jealous, but he would also be happy for Jiruo from the bottom of his heart. If Jiruo knew Liang Shixian's thoughts, he would definitely be impressed. Liang Shixian was the most responsible class monitor he had ever met. This isn't talent. You're a genius, Li Nanan stammered. It's nothing. Jiruo chuckled. Li Nanan couldn't help but ask, Jiruo, can you tell me how you created the sword art? It's no exaggeration to say that the sword technique is the most exquisite sword technique I have ever seen for martial apprentice. It's hard to imagine that a high school student created this. The process of creating a martial arts technique was a secret. Li Nanan regretted it as soon as she finished her sentence. She added, of course, It's fine if you don't want to tell me. I won't force you. Jiruo pretended to be embarrassed and scratched his head. He had already expected that someone would ask him similar questions in the future, so he had already prepared the answer. It's not really a secret. Jiruo explained, when I was young, there was a date tree in front of my house. Every autumn, when the date tree was ripe, my father would take me to climb the tree to pick the dates. He continued, sometimes, my dad would kick the date tree a few times and then collect all the dates that fell off with his body technique. Occasionally, my dad would make fun of me and let me get hit by the falling dates, while he would stand aside and laugh. Jiruo did not lie, there was indeed such a scene in the original host's memory. There was indeed a date tree outside previous home. However, after Jiruo's parents died in battle, the young Jiruo could not live on his own, so he was sent to a welfare home by the education division. After Jiruo entered high school, they gave him a new house. Liang Shixian knew the inside story and felt slightly worried. Jiruo, he said. Jiruo shook his head slightly, don't worry, class president. I'm fine. Jiruo continued, in short, my sword technique was created at that time. In order to avoid falling dates, I discovered some patterns after much observation. Later, I went to the welfare home. Because I was weak at that time, I was bullied by some mean children. My memories was deepened by their help when they throw stones at me sometimes. With that, he said, thus, I concluded and perfected it bit by bit. Finally, I formed the sword technique. I call it Solitude 9 Swords Broken Arrow form. Li Nanan was stunned. She said apologetically, I'm sorry. I didn't know. She knew very well what went to the welfare home and bullied by some mean children meant. Jiruo was an orphan. It's fine, teacher. Jiruo grinned. It's all in the past, isn't it? People always have to look forward. We can't always live in the past. Li Nanan was embarrassed that she accidentally exposed the student's wound. The atmosphere grew awkward. Seeing this, Liang Shixian pondered for a while and changed the topic. Solitude 9 Swords? In other words, there are 8 other similar sword moves. Not yet. Then why Li Nanan was confused. Teacher, don't you think the name Solitude 9 Swords sounds cool? Jiruo said with a smile. Li Nanan was rendered speechless. She cleared her throat. Deep down, she was marveling at Jiruo's talent. However, Li Nanan also felt that it was even more commendable that Jiruo was able to maintain a sincere heart for martial arts under such circumstances. She couldn't help but praise, Jiruo, you are the most outstanding student I have ever seen. If I had experienced what you have experienced, I'm afraid I wouldn't have been able to take it. You are much stronger than me. Jiruo chuckled and was about to say something, but he suddenly stopped. Congratulations for unlocking a special achievement, the first sincere praise from an elder. Reward obtained, level up *1. Upgrade, you can select an unlocked achievement to upgrade its special effects. Current stage, 1/10. Remark, your affirmation and sincere praise is my honor and motivation to become stronger. Remark, I will not let you down. Jiruo's smile suddenly stiffened, which stunned Li Nanan and Liang Shixian. Li Nanan thought she had said something wrong, so she asked carefully, Student Jiruo, what's wrong? Did I say something wrong? When Jiruo came back to his senses, his expression of joy did not seem to be fake. No, no. How could you say something wrong, teacher? You didn't say anything wrong. Then, Jiruo, why did you? I'm overjoyed. Teacher, please praise me a little more. Li Nanan was a little dumbfounded. This was the first time she had heard such a request. After all, who would take the initiative and ask to be praised? However, seeing Jiruo's face full of anticipation, she still said, Student Jiruo, you're good. Unlike Liang Shixian, who always had a physiological toothache, Li Nanan was really having a toothache. Now that the poison in her body had almost been resolved by her vitality, her previously numb body was gradually recovering. She had lost 2 teeth and the anesthetic effect had worn off. Certainly, she felt the pain. Moreover, the sympathy and admiration that had just risen in her heart suddenly disappeared because of Jiruo's actions. Hearing this, Jiruo was a little disappointed. The progress of his current achievement did not increase. He did not know if it was because he was not sincere, or because one elder could only bring him a little progress. Thank you, teacher, Jiruo said disinterestedly. Li Nanan was even more confused. What's wrong with this child? Why did he suddenly become dispirited, she wondered. She could not figure it out. Part 1 of the series ends here. If you enjoyed it, please give us a like and subscribe so we can be motivated to make even better videos in the future.